She had worn a dress. For the first time in 3 years, Clara Whitfield had worn a dress to that station, holding a photograph, holding hope. And the man stepping off the train had a scar across his jaw, a revolver on his hip, and eyes that already knew he was going to break her heart before he opened his mouth. "James Aldrich didn't make it," he said, low, steady, like a man who had rehearsed delivering bad news and still hadn't found a way to make it land softly. "He asked me to come instead." Clara looked at the gun, looked at the stranger, felt 3 years of careful planning collapse in the August heat. "I ordered a husband," she said, "not a gunslinger." He held her gaze without flinching, and something in those dark, road-worn eyes told her he had come anyway. Not because he wanted to, but because a dying man had trusted him with the only thing that still mattered. She didn't know yet that this scarred, dangerous stranger would become the one man she couldn't live without. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very last word. Then drop a comment and tell us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday. Clara remembered that detail because Tuesdays were the days she allowed herself to sit down before noon. Every other day of the week, she was on her feet from the moment gray light touched the eastern ridge until the last of the cattle had been counted and the lamps had been trimmed. But Tuesdays, she gave herself 20 minutes with a cup of coffee that was actually hot, and on that particular Tuesday, the letter from the Territorial Marriage Agency was waiting under a stone on the porch post where Hector, her foreman, always left the mail he deemed too important to lose. She hadn't opened it right away. She'd sat down with her coffee first, let herself have that small, stubborn ceremony. Then she'd broken the seal. "We are pleased to confirm the arrangement between Miss Clara Whitfield of Willow Creek, Colorado Territory, and Mr. James Aldrich of Cheyenne, Wyoming. Mr. Aldrich will depart by rail on the 14th and arrive at Willow Creek Station on the 16th. He is a farmer of good standing, temperate habits, and honest character. We trust this arrangement will prove satisfactory to both parties." Satisfactory. That was the word that made her laugh just a little, just to herself out there on the porch, with the morning wind picking up grit from the yard. Satisfactory. She wasn't looking for extraordinary. She had given up on extraordinary somewhere around the time the bank sent its second notice, and her father's health declined for the final time, and the last hired hand quit because there was no money left to pay him. Extraordinary was a young woman's luxury. Clara was 27 years old, and she ran 200 acres on her own, and what she needed, the plain, unglamorous truth of what she needed, was a partner. A man whose name could appear on the deed beside hers and satisfy the territorial law that had been making her life impossible for 3 years. A man who could work. A man who would not drink the profits or disappear or treat the ranch like something he had inherited rather than something she had bled for. James Aldrich, according to the agency's letter and the short photograph they had sent 2 months prior, was none of those terrible things. He had a plain face, kind eyes, and hands that looked like they knew work. His letter to her had been simple and honest. "I am not a man of many words, Miss Whitfield, but I am a man of my word. I would not come to your ranch to take it from you. I would come to help you keep it." That was all she had needed to read. She had written back the same day. So on the morning of the 16th, Clara Whitfield put on the only dress she owned that was not stained with fence work or cattle medicine, braided her dark hair, and drove the wagon into Willow Creek to meet her future husband at the 10 o'clock train. She got there early. That was simply who she was. She had never been late for anything in her life, and she was not going to start on this particular morning. She tied the horses at the post outside the station, smoothed the front of her dress once with both palms, and walked onto the platform with her chin level and her face arranged into an expression that said clearly that she was not nervous. She was nervous. Not the trembling, helpless kind of nervous. The Clara Whitfield kind, a coiled, controlled, quietly ferocious nervousness that she kept locked behind her sternum like a fire in a sealed stove. It threw heat, but it didn't escape. The platform was not empty. Half of Willow Creek, it seemed, had found reasons to be near the station at 10 in the morning. Margaret Hale, who ran the dress shop and remembered everything, was pretending to examine a bolt of fabric she had clearly carried outside specifically for this occasion. Sheriff Tom Briggs stood near the water trough doing a poor impression of a man who had not come to watch. Old Pete Delaney had simply dragged a chair out from the general store and sat down with his pipe, making no pretense whatsoever. Clara ignored all of them. She watched the tracks. The train was 2 minutes late. She counted them. When it finally pulled in, the long, grinding shriek of iron slowing the hiss of steam, the platform trembling slightly under her boots. She straightened her spine and fixed her eyes on the door of the second passenger car, because the agency had noted that Mr. Aldrich would be traveling second class. The doors opened. People came down. A family with 3 children and too much luggage. A salesman with a case. 2 men in business suits who were already deep in a conversation that didn't belong in Willow Creek. A woman in a gray traveling dress who looked at the town with the expression of someone realizing they had made a terrible mistake. Clara watched the second car. And then the door opened. And the man who stepped down was not James Aldrich. She knew that immediately. Not because she had memorized the photograph with perfect detail, though she had if she was being honest, but because the man who came down those steps carried himself in a way that no photograph could have prepared her for. He was tall, lean, in the way that hard years make a man lean, rather than the way that hunger does. He wore a coat that had once been good leather, and had been worn into something beyond good, something personal, something that had survived things she didn't want to name. The brim of his hat was pulled down enough to put shadow across the upper half of his face, and then he turned and she saw the scar. A pale, clean line running from just below his left eye to the edge of his jaw. Not ragged, not ugly in the way she might have expected. Just there. Permanent. A record. He scanned the platform the way men who have spent time in dangerous places scan every room they enter. Not obviously, not dramatically, but with a quiet, practiced attention that took in everything at once. His eyes moved, and then they stopped. They stopped on her, and Clara realized with a cold drop in her stomach that he had known exactly who she was the moment he saw her. He picked up his bag. One bag. He came toward her, and the platform seemed to get quieter with each step he took, though she could not have said whether that was real or something happening only inside her own chest. He stopped 2 feet away. She could see the revolver at his hip now. She had noticed it from 10 yards away, but had told herself it meant nothing. Plenty of men in the territory carried guns, but this one sat differently. Broken in. Familiar. The kind of gun that belonged to the hand it lived near. He took his hat off. That at least was a courtesy. "Miss Whitfield." His voice was low and flat, and carried no apology in it whatsoever. "You are not James Aldrich," Clara said. She had meant to say something else first, something civil, but that was what came out. "No, ma'am." "Then who are you, and why are you stepping off that train onto my platform?" He held her gaze without any particular discomfort. "My name is Cole Maddox. James Aldrich was a friend of mine. We traveled together as far as Laramie." Clara's hands went still at her sides. Something in his tone, the flatness of it, the absence of preamble, told her the rest of the sentence before he said it. "He didn't make it past Laramie." The platform noise came back to her in a rush. The hiss of steam. The conversation she hadn't been hearing. Margaret Hale's careful, studied silence from 3 yards away. "He's dead," Clara said. It wasn't a question. She was establishing the fact, making it real enough to respond to. "Yes, ma'am. His heart gave out 2 nights before we were supposed to reach the Colorado border. It was quick. He didn't suffer." Cole paused. "He asked me to give you something." He reached into the breast pocket of his coat and produced an envelope. Clara did not take it immediately. She looked at it for a moment at the handwriting on the outside, Miss Clara Whitfield, Willow Creek, in a careful, earnest hand that she recognized from the letters. Then she took it. She didn't open it. Not there. Not in front of everyone. "I'm sorry for your loss," Cole said. "I didn't know him," Clara said, and then heard how that sounded. "We had not met. We had only corresponded." "I know. He told me about you." She looked up at that. "What did he tell you?" Something moved across Cole Maddox's face that she couldn't quite name. Not quite an emotion. More like the shadow of one passing underneath a face that had learned to show very little. He told me you were a woman who deserved better than what the territory had handed her. He told me your ranch was the real thing, built by your family, held by you alone. He paused again. He told me he was looking forward to being worth something to you. Clara's jaw tightened. She would not do this here. She would absolutely not do this here. Thank you for delivering his letter, Mr. Maddox, she said with a formality she was very grateful for in that moment. I appreciate you making the trip. I'm sure you have other business in. He asked me to do more than deliver a letter. She stopped. Cole Maddox did not look like a man who enjoyed saying difficult things. He looked like a man who said them anyway because he had made a promise. He asked me to come to Willow Creek and make sure you didn't lose your ranch. The silence this time was different. He asked you. Clara's voice was very careful. A man he knew for how long? 4 years. He asked you to come to a woman you've never met and do what exactly? Stand around looking threatening until the bank changes its mind. Something shifted in Cole Maddox's expression. It wasn't quite amusement, but it was in the neighborhood. He was more specific than that. Tell me. He knew about the land provision, Cole said. The territorial banking law, that a single woman can't hold a land deed against foreclosure without a male co-signer or a husband. He'd done his research before he even answered your advertisement. Clara felt the heat rise in her face. Everyone in this county knows my business, it seems. James knew because he cared about your situation. He was coming here to fix it the right way. Cole looked at her directly. He asked me to fix it another way. The stillness on the platform had gone absolute. Clara was aware distantly that every single person pretending not to listen was now not even pretending. Say what you mean, Mr. Maddox. He asked me to marry you. The sound that Clara made was not a word. It was not quite a laugh either. It was the sound of something under extreme and unexpected pressure, finding the only outlet available to it. She turned away from him and took 3 steps toward the edge of the platform, facing the tracks, facing the direction the train had come from, as if she could will James Aldrich back into existence and make this entire conversation unnecessary. Then she turned back. I ordered a husband, she said. Her voice was clear and controlled and furious. Not a gunslinger. Cole Maddox absorbed this without moving. I understand. Do you understand that I spent 3 months corresponding with a man who seemed decent and honest and genuinely interested in building something? That I wore a dress to this platform, which I do not do as a matter of course. That half this town is watching me right now because I have no privacy left to speak of, and you are standing there telling me that the sensible plan I made is gone, and the replacement is... She stopped herself, pulled a breath. You. Yes, ma'am. With a gun on your hip. I'm aware of the gun. What do you do with it, Mr. Maddox? The question landed between them like something physical. He didn't answer immediately. That itself was an answer of a kind. Whatever needs doing, he said finally. That is not reassuring. I know. She stared at him. He held her gaze with the same steadiness he'd had from the moment he stepped off that train, and Clara found to her considerable irritation that she couldn't find any dishonesty in his face. No performance. No flattery. No attempt to charm her into something she didn't want. Just a man who had made a promise to a dying friend and come to keep it. She hated that. She would have found him much easier to dismiss if he'd tried to charm her. You cannot marry me, she said. You don't know me. James knew you well enough to want better for you than losing your land. James is dead. Yes. Something real crossed his face for the first time. Brief and quickly controlled, but real. He is. And he mattered to me. And the last thing he asked me for was this. So I'm here. Clara pressed her lips together, opened her envelope. James Aldrich's handwriting was careful and unhurried, the handwriting of a man who thought before he wrote. Dear Miss Whitfield, if you are reading this, things have not gone as I had hoped. I am sorry for that. I was looking forward to meeting you. I was looking forward to the ranch. I was looking forward to being the kind of man you could count on. Cole Maddox is the most trustworthy man I have ever known, and I have known him through circumstances that would reveal any man's character completely. He will not harm you. He will not lie to you. He will do what he says and say what he means. I know this is not what you planned. I know you are angry. If I know anything about you from your letters, I know you are angry right now. Please listen to him anyway. Yours with respect, James Aldrich. Clara folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, put the envelope in the pocket of her dress. How long? She said. Cole looked at her. If I were to consider this hypothetically, how long would this arrangement need to last? Long enough to satisfy the bank and secure the deed in both names. A year, most likely. Maybe less, depending on how quickly the paperwork processes through the territorial office. And what do you want from this? What does Cole Maddox get out of keeping a dead man's promise? He was quiet for a moment. When he answered, it was simply, somewhere to be, for a while. Clara studied him. The scar, the gun, the coat that had survived more than one hard winter. The steadiness in him that she didn't trust yet, but couldn't entirely dismiss. She thought about the bank's letter. The third one. The one that had arrived 6 days ago with a timeline that allowed no softness, settle the matter of the cosigner, or vacate the property by the last day of October. She thought about her father building that ranch with his hands. About her mother planting the kitchen garden that still grew stubbornly every spring despite everything. About every fence she had mended alone in the wind, and every night she had done the accounts at the kitchen table, and chosen which debt to pay, and which to carry another month. She was not going to lose that ranch. You come to the ranch, she said. We don't sign anything today. You come, you meet my foreman, you see what the work is. If you're serious about this, and if you can behave like a civilized man, we discuss the arrangement further. If you can't, you're back on the next train. That's fair, Cole said. And the gun. He waited. I won't have it in my house. If you come into my house, it stays on the porch. A beat. Agreed. Then follow me, Mr. Maddox. She walked past him toward the wagon without looking at the assembled witnesses who had just watched all of this unfold. And keep up. I'm not driving slowly for the sake of politeness. He kept up. She had half hoped he wouldn't, half hoped he'd dawdle or complain or ask how far it was, something that would give her a reason to dismiss him cleanly. But he climbed into the wagon, set his single bag at his feet, and rode in silence as she drove them out of Willow Creek and onto the ranch road. And he didn't speak unless she spoke first, and when she spoke he answered without ornamentation or performance. She asked him where he was from. Wyoming originally, before that Kansas. Before that didn't seem like a place he was going to name, so she didn't push. She asked him how he'd known James Aldrich. They'd worked cattle together a few seasons before James had decided to settle. Clara filed that away. She did not ask about the scar. She wasn't sure she wanted to know, and she was also, she told herself firmly, not curious about it. She simply noticed it in the way she noticed everything, because ignoring things on her ranch had cost her before and she had stopped doing it. What she noticed driving the wagon in the August heat with a stranger sitting a careful 2 feet from her was that Cole Maddox did not take up space the way most men did. He didn't sprawl. He didn't try to dominate the silence with talk. He sat like a man who had learned or been taught to be contained, to make himself small enough to not threaten even when he was by any measure the most physically formidable person within a mile. She noticed that when a jackrabbit broke across the road and the horses shied, his hand went to the reins beside hers before she had pulled, not grabbing just there and then, withdrew the moment the horses steadied, as if he hadn't done it. She noticed that he was looking at the land as they drove, not the way a stranger looks at unfamiliar territory, cataloging it as he went. The way a person looks at something they are trying to understand, something they are giving real attention to. She did not say any of this. Hector Reyes had been her father's foreman, and then hers for 9 years, and he had the kind of face that could hold an opinion completely invisible when he chose. He chose it now, standing in the ranch yard, when the wagon rolled in his arms, not quite crossed, and his eyes moving from Clara to the man beside her, and back to Clara, with a patience that was in its way a question. "Hector," Clara said, climbing down. "This is Cole Maddox. The arrangement has changed. I'll explain it inside. Right now, show him where he can put his things." "Yes, ma'am." Hector's voice was perfectly neutral. He looked at Cole Maddox the way a man looks at a horse he's not sure is broke. "Bunkhouse is this way." Cole climbed down from the wagon, picked up his bag, and followed Hector without comment or complaint about the accommodations. Clara watched him go. She noted, and then was irritated with herself for noting that he moved with a kind of quiet economy that suggested he had slept in considerably worse places than a bunkhouse and found no insult in being sent to one. She went inside. She sat at the kitchen table and opened James Aldrich's letter again and read it twice. Then she put her head down on her arms for exactly 30 seconds, which was all she allowed herself. Then she sat up, put the letter in the drawer with the ranch papers, and started making dinner because life continued regardless of its inconveniences, and there were now at least 3 mouths to feed instead of 2. The next week was a study in watching without appearing to watch. She had told herself she was simply being practical. She needed to assess whether Cole Maddox was actually capable of the work the ranch required before she committed to anything. That was sensible. That was rational. That had nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that she found herself paying closer attention to what he did than she had any particular reason to. What he did was work. Not in the showy, self-conscious way of a man trying to prove something, trying to earn his place or demonstrate his value in a way that would require acknowledgement. He simply worked. He was up before she was, and she was up early enough to see the first light, and by the time she was in the yard, he had already done an hour's worth of something useful without being told. The fence posts on the east pasture that had been on her list for 2 weeks were set and solid by the 3rd day. The trough that leaked had stopped leaking. He found the weakness in the water supply line from the creek that Hector had been worrying about for a month and fixed it in an afternoon with materials he found in the tool shed. He didn't announce any of it. He just did it and moved on. Hector, by the end of the first week, had revised whatever opinion he'd formed at the initial inspection. He didn't say this directly. He simply started consulting Cole about the cattle rotation without being asked to, and with Hector, that was a declaration. The town was less measured. Margaret Hale came by with a pie on the 4th day, ostensibly as a welcome gift, actually as reconnaissance, and spent 45 minutes in Clara's kitchen, marveling that Clara had, in her words, taken in a man like Cole Maddox, as if Clara had found a stray. "He's not dangerous to me," Clara said, because it was the truth, and because Margaret's tone required addressing. "You don't know what he's done, Clara." "I don't know what most people have done, Margaret. I find it more productive to judge what they do in front of me." Margaret left with the distinct sense that she had not accomplished her objective, which Clara considered a complete success. But the comment planted something she hadn't asked for. She began watching Cole differently, not for what he was doing, but for what he was not doing. Not once did he speak to her in a tone that suggested she was beneath his authority. Not once did he assume any ownership of the ranch's decisions or override her word on anything. When she told Hector they were moving the cattle to the north pasture, Cole moved them without inserting an opinion about whether that was the right call. When she made a mistake, and she made one on the 6th day, when she miscalculated how much water the south field would need and dried out 2 rows of the kitchen garden. He didn't say, "I could have told you." He didn't say anything. He just helped her fix it. She didn't know what to do with a man who didn't need to be right. It was the night of the 8th day that she found out about his hands. She hadn't been able to sleep the heat, the accumulated weight of the week's thinking, and she had gone to the kitchen for water, and she had passed the window that looked out over the yard, and she had seen him sitting on the porch steps in the dark. She almost went back to bed. It was none of her business what the man did with his nights. She went outside instead. Couldn't sleep either. she said, which was easier than explaining why she was there. I sleep light, he said. Habit. She sat down on the porch, not on the steps with him, but on the bench with a few feet of night air between them. The revolver was hanging on the peg just inside the door where it stayed every night, and she found she was no longer registering it the way she had in the first 2 days. It had become simply part of the architecture of the porch. She looked at his hands in the dark. She had been watching his hands all week, watching them work, and she had noticed things she hadn't entirely processed. The way certain motions cost him slightly more than they should. The careful angle at which he held a hammer. The way he favored his right hand on some tasks in a way that didn't quite match right-handedness. The left hand, she said. He looked at her. Something happened to it. He looked down at his left hand, turned it over once slowly in the dark. Yeah. Work accident. The pause was long enough to be its own answer. No. She didn't push. She sat with that for a while the way she sat with things that were complicated, giving them room, not demanding that they resolve themselves immediately. I'm going to tell you something, she said finally, and I want you to understand. I'm telling you because you should know where you stand, not because I owe you an explanation. He turned slightly toward her. In 4 weeks, the bank sends another representative to inspect the property and review the deed status. If the name situation is not resolved by then, if there is not a cosigner or a husband on that deed, they have the legal right to begin foreclosure proceedings. My father's loan was significant. I've paid down the principal for 3 years on my own, but the territorial provision doesn't care about that. It cares about names. She paused. So, if we are going to do this, we need to do it in the next 2 weeks to allow for processing time.
Başkim terimande mich uschmelt.
Cole was quiet for a moment. You've decided. I've decided to tell you the timeline. That's not the same thing. What else do you need to know? She looked at him in the dark. At the scar she had stopped seeing as alarming and started seeing as simply part of his face. At the stillness in him that she had initially read as coldness and had gradually revised to something more like discipline. Why did James trust you? She said. The question seemed to reach something in him. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. 4 years ago, he said, I was working a job I had no business working, the kind of job you take when you've run out of the other kinds. He stopped, started again. James was there. Not for the same job he'd come to get his brother out of a bad situation and needed someone who knew the territory. We ended up in the same place at the same time when things went wrong. He turned the scarred hand over again slowly. He got his brother out. He didn't have to get me out at the same time. He did anyway. Clara said nothing. After that, he kept saying I was worth more than what I was doing, that the choices I made didn't have to be permanent. A pause. I didn't believe him for a long time. Do you now? He looked at her steadily in the dark. I'm here, aren't I? That was not an answer. It was also somehow exactly an answer. She stood up, smoothed the front of her robe. I'll speak to the lawyer in town tomorrow about the paperwork. Be ready to go in with me on Thursday. She went inside before he could respond. She didn't look back through the window. She did not do that. Thursday was a different kind of quiet. They drove into Willow Creek together, which caused its own minor spectacle, and they sat across from Harvey Dunn, who had been the territorial land attorney in Willow Creek for 22 years, and who had the professional composure to draw up the marriage paperwork without commenting on the circumstances, though his eyebrows did precisely one full contraction when he saw Cole Maddox's name on the form. This is a legal arrangement, Clara said, preempting whatever comment he was formulating. Mr. Maddox is aware of the terms. I am aware of the terms. We would like to proceed. Harvey Dunn proceeded. They signed. Walking out of the office into the afternoon, Clara felt something she had not anticipated. Not relief exactly, not satisfaction. Something more like the feeling of a loaded spring that has been compressed for a very long time, shifting slightly in its tension. Not released, just shifted. Well, she said. Well, Cole said. They stood on the sidewalk outside Harvey Dunn's office with the signed papers in Clara's hands, and the August sun pressing down on both of them, and the entire eastern side of Willow Creek's Main Street, conducting various errands that seemed to require proximity to Harvey Dunn's window. "You should know," Clara said, "that I have one rule." He waited. "This is a business arrangement. You do not own me. You do not own my decisions. You do not have authority over my ranch that I haven't specifically given you. If at any point you begin behaving as if the name on the deed grants you something, it doesn't. This ends. I'll find another way." Cole Maddox looked at her for a moment. Something in his face was very quiet and very steady. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "you're the one doing me a favor here. I'm not confused about that." She looked at him. "All right," she said. She walked to the wagon. He followed. They drove back to the ranch in the same companionable silence they had developed over the past 8 days, which was, Clara acknowledged to herself privately, with considerable reservation, the most comfortable silence she had shared with another adult in longer than she could accurately measure. She did not share this acknowledgement with anyone. She was not entirely sure what to do with it herself.
Janet.
The letter arrived 11 days later. It was addressed to Cole Maddox General Delivery, Willow Creek, Colorado Territory, and the return address was a name Clara didn't recognize at first. S. Crow Territorial Commerce Associates, Denver, and the handwriting on the outside was the kind of handwriting that came from money. Deliberate, unhurried, absolutely certain of itself. Cole was in the north pasture when it arrived. Clara put it on the porch railing without opening it because it was not her letter, and she was not a person who opened things that weren't hers. But when she heard him come up the yard in the evening, and she saw him stop at the railing and look at that envelope, she saw something she had not seen in 11 days of watching him closely. She saw him go still in a way that was completely different from his normal stillness. His normal stillness was calm. This was something else. Something that recognized a name on an envelope the way an animal recognizes the sound of something it has spent years learning to avoid. He took the letter inside without opening it. He didn't come to dinner. Hector found a reason to check the barn that took most of the evening, which was Hector's way of giving a situation room to breathe. Clara sat at the kitchen table after she'd cleaned up and looked at the door to the bunkhouse from the window and thought about what she'd seen on Cole Maddox's face. And she thought about what James Aldrich's letter had said, "the most trustworthy man I have ever known." And she thought about the nature of promises and the things they required. She thought about the things she had not yet asked because she had been too busy judging what he did in front of her. She had not yet asked what he was running from. The evening light faded. She thought maybe she should ask. She didn't ask that night. She asked the next morning when she found him at the fence line before sunrise with a post driver in his hands and a set to his jaw that told her he hadn't slept. "The letter," she said. No preamble. She had found she could dispense with preamble with him, which was a comfort. "Who is Silas Crow?" He drove the post once. Hard. Straightened. "Someone from before," he said. "How far before?" "Far enough that I thought it was done." Clara crossed her arms and waited. He looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes, the calculation of a man deciding how much truth a situation requires, and then he seemed to resolve it in the direction of more rather than less. "Silas Crow runs a business operation out of Denver," he said. "Land acquisitions, territorial contracts, certain kinds of consulting that don't appear in any public records." A pause. "I used to be one of those consulting arrangements." "Consulting," Clara said. "I was good at solving problems for men who couldn't solve them through ordinary channels." She held his gaze. "And you stopped." 4 years ago, after James. He set the post driver down. "Crow doesn't retire people. He loans them out. I just stopped going when he called." "And now he's called again." Cole didn't answer for a moment. "He's found me. That's not the same thing as calling." "What does he want?" "To make clear," Cole said, "that the space between us is his decision, not mine." Clara stood in the early light and felt something very cold and very clear move through her chest. Not fear exactly, or not only fear, something more like the recognition of a problem that had been present all along underground and was now surfacing. Will he come here? She said. Cole looked at her with an honesty that she found in that moment more frightening than any evasion would have been. I don't know, he said. I hope not. I'm going to try to make sure he doesn't. How? I wrote back last night. I told him I'm settled. I told him I have a life here and I'm not available. And you think that will satisfy him? The pause that followed was the briefest she'd heard from him. It told her everything about what he thought. No, he said. Clara breathed in, breathed out. Let the morning air move through her and settle. All right. He looked at her. All right. I'm not sending you away because your past has a long reach, she said. That's not who I am. But I expect you to tell me what I need to know when I need to know it. No more arriving late to information. He was quiet for a moment. Agreed. Good. She picked up the second post driver from the ground. Help me finish this section before breakfast. The cattle won't wait for anyone's complications. He looked at the post driver in her hands. Something shifted in his face, not quite the shadow of an emotion this time. Something closer to the actual thing. He picked up his end of the fence. They worked in the early light without speaking, and the fence line grew steady and solid and real between them post by post in the kind of silence that Clara had come to understand meant something completely different than it had 11 days ago. The truth of it was, this Clara Whitfield had never expected to want anything from this arrangement beyond the legal resolution it provided. She had been careful about that. Deliberate. She had drawn the line on the first day, this is only business, and she had believed herself when she said it. She was beginning to have doubts. Not the romantic kind of doubt, she told herself. The practical kind. The kind that arose from observing a man closely for nearly 2 weeks, and finding that every observation ran contrary to every assumption she'd had on the platform at the station. She had expected coldness and found a kind of careful warmth. She had expected ego and found the total quiet absence of it. She had expected a man who needed to be managed and found instead a man who managed himself with a precision that put most men she had known to shame. She had expected to feel unsafe, and she did not feel unsafe. That last thing was the most confusing of all. It confused her because she had been managing her own safety for so long, with such vigilance, that the absence of that particular vigilance felt strange in her own skin. Like a shoulder she'd been holding rigid for years, finally letting down. She didn't know what to do with that. She thought she should probably do something with it before the man's former employer sent someone to her ranch with a message she wasn't equipped to receive. She thought for the first time in 3 years that she might not be entirely alone in the receiving of it. That thought scared her more than Silas Crow. Not because it was bad, because she didn't yet know how much she could afford to trust it. The fence they built that morning held. Clara checked it twice before noon, running her hand along the top rail the way her father had taught her, not because she doubted the work, but because the ranch had trained her to verify everything with her own hands before trusting it. The posts were solid. The wire was tight. Whatever Cole Maddox had been in his life before Willow Creek, his hands knew real work. She filed that away with everything else she was filing. Hector found her at the water trough after lunch, which meant Hector had something to say, and was deciding how to say it, which meant she was about to have a conversation she hadn't asked for. "Go ahead," she said before he could arrange his opening. Hector leaned against the trough post. He was 61 years old and had worked cattle since he was 14, and he had exactly 2 expressions, neutral and concerned. He was wearing the concerned one. "Word came in from town this morning. Pete Delaney's been talking." Pete Delaney is always talking. This time he's saying Cole Maddox killed 3 men in Wyoming. Clara kept her hands in the water. Did Pete Delaney witness this? No. Did Pete Delaney provide a source? You know Pete. Then Pete Delaney is repeating something someone told someone who told someone else, and by the time it got to Pete, it had probably doubled in body count. She pulled her hands out and dried them on her work pants. "What do you think, Hector?" "You've worked beside him for 2 weeks." Hector was quiet for a moment. That was its own kind of answer. "I think he works hard and keeps his word and doesn't cause trouble," he said carefully. "I also think there's things behind his eyes he hasn't said." "Yes," Clara said. "There are. He's told me enough for me to know what I need to know right now." She looked at Hector directly. "Is he good with the cattle?" "Best I've worked with in 10 years. "Is he good with you?" A pause. "Respectful. Listens. Doesn't act like he knows more than he does about how this particular place runs. Then for now, that's what matters." She picked up her gloves. "Tell Pete Delaney that if he wants to spread stories about my husband, he can come say them to my face." Hector almost smiled. He covered it quickly. "Yes, ma'am." She went back to work. But Hector's words followed her through the afternoon like a stone in her boot, not crippling, but present. Things behind his eyes he hasn't said. She knew that. She had known that since the train platform. The question she kept returning to, the one that had no clean answer, was whether the things unsaid were the kind that would matter when they surfaced, and things always surfaced, in her experience, or whether they were simply the ordinary accumulation of a life lived in hard circumstances. She had things behind her own eyes she hadn't said. She supposed everyone did. It was Cole who broke the pattern that evening. He came to the kitchen door while she was making up the accounts at the table, a weekly ritual she conducted with the same grim efficiency she applied to everything, and he knocked on the frame instead of just appearing, which she had noticed was something he always did. He never assumed permission. "Can I come in?" She gestured at the opposite chair, without looking up from the ledger. "If you have something to say, say it. I'm in the middle of October's numbers." He sat down. He didn't speak immediately, which she had also come to recognize as part of how he operated. He collected himself before he talked. Some men filled silence, compulsively nervous about what it might contain. Cole treated silence like a tool, useful, intentional, something to be deployed rather than avoided. "I want to tell you something," he said. "About Silas Crow." She put her pencil down. "More than I told you this morning," he said. "You asked me not to come late to information, so—" He folded his hands on the table, the scarred left one on top. "Crow doesn't just acquire land, he acquires leverage. The way he operates, he finds what a territory needs, and he inserts himself between the need and the supply. Water rights, rail contracts, timber licenses. Things that look like commerce until you understand that every transaction has a second layer that only Crow profits from." Clara looked at him steadily. "And you helped him do this." "I helped him keep people from interfering with it." A pause. "When someone threatened to go to the federal land office, or when a competing claim needed discouraging, I was the discouragement." "By what means?" He met her eyes. He didn't soften it. "Whatever means were necessary. I didn't kill people for him. I want you to know that. But I put fear in people. I made situations go a particular way by being the kind of man people didn't want to argue with." He stopped. "I'm not going to sit in your kitchen and pretend it was something other than what it was." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the night sounds of the ranch crickets, the distant low of cattle, the creak of the weather vane continued indifferently. "Why are you telling me this tonight?" Clara said. "Because his letter wasn't a first contact. It was a reminder." Cole looked at the table. "Crow has a way of reminding people what they owe him. I left his operation without permission and without giving back what he considered his, which was the reputation I'd built working for him, the knowledge I had, the connections I'd made on his behalf. In his mind, I'm still his. The letter was a courtesy, which means the next thing won't be." Clara absorbed this. She was quiet long enough that Cole glanced up at her, checking. She noted not whether she was afraid, but whether she was still with him, tracking the information rather than shutting down. "When you say the next thing won't be a courtesy," she said, "what does that look like specifically?" "He'll send someone to talk to me, make an offer. If I decline the offer, the conversation changes." "Changes to what?" "To whatever he thinks will change my answer, which might be a threat against my ability to stay here." Or a threat against the ranch's standing with the bank Crow has connections with territorial lenders. Or, he stopped. Or a threat against me, Clara said. He didn't confirm it. He also didn't deny it, and she gave him credit for not insulting her intelligence by pretending that wasn't on the table. How long do we have before he sends someone? She said. A week, maybe 2. All right. She picked her pencil back up. We won't wait for it. He looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not a person who sits and waits for problems to arrive. If Silas Crow is going to be a problem for this ranch, I want to understand the shape of it before it's standing in my yard. She looked back at the ledger, but she wasn't seeing the numbers. I have a cousin in Denver who works at the Territorial Commerce Registry. I'm going to write to her tomorrow and ask her to pull everything publicly filed under Crow's business name. If his operation has the shape you're describing, there will be paperwork somewhere that shows it. Cole was quiet for a moment. You're not, he started. I'm not what I expected you to tell me to handle it. Clara set the pencil down again and looked at him directly. Mr. Maddox, this is my ranch. Whatever is coming here. That makes it my problem as much as yours. She paused. More than yours, actually, because when you came here, you brought it with you, which means I deserve to know what I'm dealing with. He absorbed that without flinching. You're right. I usually am, she said, and went back to her numbers. She heard something she hadn't heard from him before. Very quiet. Almost nothing. But unmistakable. He laughed. It was a short sound, and it was gone almost the moment it appeared, but it was real. Not performed, not polite, the involuntary kind that escapes a person before they can manage it. She kept her eyes on the ledger. She did not comment on it. But she kept that sound somewhere she didn't examine directly, the way she kept certain other things. James Aldrich's letter. The feeling of the fence posts solid under her hand that morning, in a place that was hers, and not for general review. The town came to a head on market day. Every second Thursday, Willow Creek held a trading post at the square. Dried goods livestock exchanged the post office, opening its second window to handle the backlog. It was the day most ranch operations sent someone in for supplies, and it was the day the social architecture of the community made itself most visible. Clara had always found market day useful and faintly exhausting. Useful because she could handle a week's worth of supply business in a single morning. Exhausting because a single woman running a ranch attracted a specific quality of attention that she had learned to navigate but had never learned to enjoy. She hadn't considered what market day would look like with Cole Maddox walking beside her. She found out. The attention was immediate and completely different in character. Not the curious, slightly pitying attention of men looking at a woman managing alone. Something sharper, more active. The kind of attention that involved reassessment, that required people to adjust a story they'd already told themselves. Clara Whitfield with a husband was a different proposition than Clara Whitfield without one, and Cole Maddox was not the kind of husband who faded into the background. He was also, she discovered, not oblivious to any of it. He noticed every glance, every repositioning, every conversation that paused as they passed. He didn't react visibly to any of it. He simply noted and continued, and Clara found herself deeply grateful for this, for the absence of performance, the absence of chest-puffing that another kind of man might have engaged in making her situation into a display of his. They were at the dry goods counter when the first direct encounter happened. Tom Cassidy, who ran the largest competing ranch operation in the county and who had been making offers on Clara's east pasture for 2 years, walked up with a smile that didn't reach anything above his mouth. "Clara," he said with the familiarity of a man who had decided they were on a first-name basis against her preference. "Mr. Cassidy," she said. His eyes moved to Cole, traveled up and back down with the efficiency of a man taking an inventory. "Heard you'd gotten yourself a husband," he said. "Didn't expect a small pause perfectly judged, this particular type." Clara put her list on the counter. "What can I do for you, Mr. Cassidy?" "Just being neighborly." His eyes hadn't left Cole. "I don't think we've met formally. Tom Cassidy. I've got the Double C operation east side of county. Cole looked at him. I know who you are. Cassidy's smile shifted slightly. Do you? Clara's mentioned the East pasture offers. Cole's voice was entirely pleasant and entirely empty of warmth. She's not interested. I was speaking to Clara. She's standing right here, Cole said. I imagine she'll correct me if I've got her position wrong. Clara kept her face neutral and her attention apparently on her supply list. She said nothing. She let that sentence settle. Cassidy looked at her. She met his eyes briefly blandly and returned to her list. He left without buying anything. When he was gone, she said without looking up, You didn't need to do that. I know, Cole said. Did you want me not to? She considered. I've been managing Tom Cassidy for 2 years on my own. I know that too. But, she said because there was one she could hear it. No but, he said. You've been managing him. That doesn't mean you've enjoyed it. She looked up at that. He was looking at her with that quiet directness that she still hadn't entirely gotten used to the absence of agenda in it, the pure, uncomplicated accuracy. No, she said after a moment. I haven't enjoyed it. Then I don't think I was wrong to say something. She went back to her list. You weren't wrong, she said, and that was all she said about it. It was Margaret Hale who delivered the blow that Clara hadn't seen coming. She found Clara at the post office window near the end of market morning, and her face had that particular expression, bright and careful and faintly sorry, that Clara had learned to treat as a warning signal. Clara, I want to tell you something as a friend, Margaret said, before you hear it from someone less friendly. Clara turned from the counter. Go ahead. There's been a letter, not to you, to Sheriff Briggs. Margaret lowered her voice in a way that paradoxically drew more attention from the surrounding market traffic. From a land office in Denver. Someone has filed a secondary claim against your East pasture. A legitimate filing, apparently. Briggs got the notification this morning. Clara went very still. The name on the filing, Margaret continued with the careful delivery of a person depositing something explosive, is Territorial Commerce Associates. The name hit Clara like cold water. Silas Crow, not a week, not 2 weeks. He hadn't sent someone to talk to Cole. He'd moved on the land directly. She thanked Margaret with a calm she did not feel and walked out of the post office and found Cole at the livery where he'd taken the horses to be watered, and she stood in front of him and said, He's already moved. Cole's face changed. A secondary land claim on my East pasture, she said. Filed under his business name. Briggs got the notice this morning. She watched Cole absorb this, watched the stillness in him shift into something tighter, something that had edges. That's not a communication, he said. That's a demonstration. Of what? That he can reach you without reaching me. Cole's jaw was set. That's the message. He's not coming for me. He's coming for what I'd protect. The understanding of that moved through Clara with a precision that was almost physical. Silas Crow, who she had never met, who had never set foot on her land, who existed in her life only as a name on an envelope, and now on a land office filing, had made himself a problem of hers because she had made herself a problem of his by existing in Cole Maddox's life. All right, she said. Cole looked at her. She could see him calculating something, working out whether to say the thing he was thinking. She had learned to read that particular hesitation in him. Say it, she said. You could still step back from this, he said. The marriage, it's real on paper, but there's no court in the territory that would enforce. Stop. He stopped. I am not stepping back from my own ranch, she said, because a businessman in Denver decided to make a point with my land. That's my East pasture. My father built that fence. And no one, not Silas Crow, not the bank, not anyone is going to convince me to abandon it by making me afraid. She held his gaze. So instead of suggesting I retreat, tell me what he needs to make this claim hold. Cole blinked. Just once. It was the closest thing to surprise she had seen on his face. He needs an original grant that predates your father's deed. Does he have one? Not that I know of. Then he's bluffing. Or he's manufactured something which can be proved false if we can get in front of the right office with the right documentation. She was already thinking through it. My father's original deed is in the ranch safe. I have every payment record for 3 years. The land registry in Denver will have my family's original territorial claim from 1861. She looked at Cole directly. Can you get me in front of someone at the federal land office? He looked at her for a long moment. A new kind of look, she couldn't put a name to it, but it registered somewhere in her chest. I know someone in the regional office in Boulder. We worked together years ago under different circumstances, but he's honest. He'd see you. Set it up, she said. And in the meantime, I'm going to write to my cousin in Denver, and I'm going to pull every public record on Silas Crow's business filings that exists. Clara. What? He said her name again, but differently this time. You understand this is going to make things harder before it makes them easier. She looked at him steadily. Things have been hard before. I'm still here. Whatever he'd been about to say, he didn't say it. He nodded once. She turned and walked back toward the main road, and she heard him fall into step behind her. And she thought, not for the first time, but for the first time, with something like certainty, that the man walking behind her was not a complication she had married. He was the only person in her immediate vicinity who seemed to understand the situation with the same clarity that she did. That was not a small thing.
Chapter R.
The revelation came in pieces the way real revelations usually do. It started with her cousin Elena's reply, which arrived 6 days later and was 3 pages long and contained information that made Clara sit down in the kitchen and read it twice, slowly, before she called for Cole. He came in from the yard still carrying a work glove in one hand and stopped when he saw her face. Sit down, she said. He sat. Elena works in the Public Commerce Registry, Clara said. She pulled everything filed under Territorial Commerce Associates and under Silas Crow personally. She spread the pages on the table between them. He has active land claims in 4 counties, secondary filings on properties with vulnerable title situations, single owners' disputed inheritances, properties with bank liens, every single one of them. She looked up. This is what he does. This isn't about you, Cole. You were a tool. When you left, he needed a new reason to come to Willow Creek, and my east pasture is the reason. Cole was reading Elena's pages. She watched his face as he read, watched something happen there that she couldn't immediately categorize. There's more, she said. The bank examiner who sent my last foreclosure notice, the one who gave me the October deadline. She turned to the second page. His name appears in 3 of these other filings as a point of contact for the lending institution. Cole looked up. The bank, she said. The same bank that holds my loan and has been pressing the foreclosure. It has a financial relationship with Crow's land operation. She let that land. He didn't just file a competing claim on my east pasture. He's been applying pressure through the bank since before you arrived. The marriage provision, the October deadline, it was designed to make the ranch vulnerable enough for his claim to have standing. The silence in the kitchen was a different quality than their usual silences. This one had weight. He was never coming for me, Cole said. It wasn't a question. He was understanding something. Willow Creek. He came here because of your land. And you were the connection that led him to notice it. Clara held his gaze. I don't say that to blame you. I say it because we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Cole set the pages down. The muscle in his jaw was working. He'll have someone in town, watching, reporting back. He thought for a moment. Cassidy. Clara went still. Tom Cassidy. 2 years of offers on your east pasture. Crow uses local men people with apparent legitimate interest. They do the groundwork, gather the information, and Crow files when the target is most vulnerable. He looked at her. Cassidy's been feeding him information on your financial situation. The pieces assembled themselves in Clara's chest with a horrible clean precision. 2 years of Cassidy's offers. The specificity of the bank's pressure. The timing of the competing claim not random, but arriving exactly when she was in the midst of a changed domestic situation that might distract her. "He thought my marrying you would distract me," she said slowly. "He thought a woman managing a new and complicated marriage arrangement would be easier to move against." Cole's expression was tight. "He doesn't know you." "No," Clara said. "He doesn't." She stood up and went to the window and looked out at the east pasture at the fence she and Cole had built together in the early morning light at the cattle, moving slow and purposeful across the grass that was hers. "I want to go to Boulder," she said. "Your contact at the Federal Land Office. Can we get an appointment by end of next week? I'll send a wire today, and I want to send a second letter to Elena. If Crow's operation has the pattern she's found, there may be other property owners in those 4 counties who are dealing with the same pressure. If there are enough of them, it's not a local matter anymore. It's a pattern of federal land fraud." Cole was quiet for a moment behind her. She heard him stand. "Clara," he said. She turned. He was standing at the table with her cousin's pages in his hands and an expression on his face that she had not seen before. Not the controlled steadiness she had catalogued over 3 weeks. Something underneath that something older and less practiced. "I didn't come here expecting this," he said. "Any of it." She looked at him. "Neither did I. What I mean is—" He stopped, started again. "I came here to keep a promise. To do one decent thing for a man who deserved better from me than I gave him while he was alive." He set the pages down. "I wasn't planning on it mattering. I wasn't planning on the ranch mattering or—" He stopped again. She waited. She had a feeling for the first time in a long time that she should be patient with a silence. That what was on the other side of it was worth waiting for. "Or you," he said finally. The kitchen was very quiet. The evening sounds of the ranch continued outside the weather vane, the distant cattle, the wind in the empty space between words. Clara Whitfield had not survived 3 years alone by being reckless with hope. She had learned the cost of opening doors that couldn't be closed again, the particular cruelty of wanting things that the territory and its circumstances were likely to deny you. She was discovering not entirely able to keep that door closed when Cole Maddox was standing in her kitchen telling her the truth with no ornamentation and no performance and no agenda she could locate. "You matter here," she said. It was careful. It was measured. It was also, she recognized, the truest thing she had said out loud in a very long time. "Whatever this started as you matter to this ranch, and to me." He looked at her. Something settled in his face. Not relief exactly, something deeper than relief. Something that looked like a man recognizing solid ground after a long time without it. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. She nodded once. "I know," she said. "That's why I said it." She picked up Elena's pages and squared them neatly and set them beside the accounts ledger because there was work to do, and the work did not pause for moments like this one, and they were both people who understood that. But something had changed in the kitchen. Something small, and not yet named, but real. The way a shift in the season is real before it's visible, you feel it in the air before you see it in the trees. She did not examine it directly. She went back to the ledger. Cole stayed at the table for a while longer than he needed to, and neither of them mentioned that either. 3 days before they were due to leave for Boulder, Hector found something that changed the timeline. He came to the kitchen at 6 in the morning, which was early even for him, and his face had moved all the way from neutral into something she hadn't seen there in years. Not concerned, alarmed. "There's a man camped on the Delaney Road," he said. "Been there since yesterday from the tracks. Watching the east pasture approach." Clara's hands went still around her coffee cup. Description: city clothes, horse that costs more than anything in Willow Creek. Hector's jaw was tight. "He's not from here, Miss Clara. And he's not hiding particularly hard. Like he wants to be seen." Cole came through the back door at that moment, already in his work coat, and read the room in about 2 seconds flat. What happened? Someone's watching the east approach, Clara said. Clara. Cole's face did the thing it had done when he'd seen Crow's letter on the porch railing. The absolute stillness that was different from his normal stillness. The recognition of something he'd been waiting for without wanting to. He sent someone faster than I expected, Cole said. Or Cassidy told him we were going to Boulder, Clara said. That landed in the kitchen like a stone in still water. Cole looked at her. You think Cassidy knows? I think if Cassidy has been reporting our financial situation, he's been reporting everything. And if he knows we're going to the federal land office... She set down her coffee. Crow is trying to rattle us before we get there. Make us feel watched. Make us second guess whether to go. Will it work? Hector said. Clara stood up from the table. No, she said. Get the horses ready. We're going to Boulder 3 days early. Cole looked at her. Today. This morning. She was already moving toward the back room where the ranch safe was. Pack what you need. I'll get the documents. Hector, I need you to stay on the property and keep the east fence line visible from the yard. She paused. And Hector, yes, ma'am. Don't engage with whoever is on the Delaney Road. Let him watch. I want him to see us leave. Hector almost smiled again. You want him to report it? I want him to report that we left in a hurry, she said. That we looked scared. Cole understood immediately. So Crow thinks we panicked. He relaxes his timeline. And we get to Boulder before anyone tells him we're coming, Clara said. If your contact is half as honest as you say, we can have this in front of the right people before Crow's man finishes his first dispatch back to Denver. She went to the safe. She heard Cole behind her moving toward the door to pack his bag, and she heard him say something under his breath that she almost didn't catch. She thought it was James would have liked her. She didn't turn around. She worked the combination on the safe with steady hands. But she was smiling, just slightly. Just to herself, in the particular private way of a person who has been alone for a long time and has just remembered unexpectedly what it feels like not to be. The documents were all there. Every deed, every payment record, every letter and receipt going back to her father's original claim. 3 years of solitary, stubborn, meticulous record-keeping. Every piece of paper she had filed away against precisely this kind of moment, on the instinct that a careful woman should be ready for the things she hoped would never come. She pulled the stack out, wrapped it in the oilcloth, and tucked it under her arm. She was ready. She had been ready for a long time. The only new thing, the thing that was not 3 years old, and not her own solitary preparation, was the sound of a man moving around in her house, getting ready to stand beside her. And she found as she walked back through the kitchen and out toward the waiting horses that it was a sound she had stopped bracing against. That was either the bravest thing she had ever done or the most reckless. She suspected it might be both. They rode out before 7. Clara had the oilcloth parcel of documents tucked inside her coat pressed against her ribs, and she was aware of it the entire ride. The way you are aware of something that matters not. Uncomfortable, just present. Constant. The way a heartbeat is present. Cole rode beside her without crowding her. He had that quality, the ability to be physically close without pressing against the space a person needed. She had noticed it from the first wagon ride, and she noticed it again now on the road north toward Boulder, with the morning still cool, and the man on the Delaney Road presumably watching them go and thinking whatever Silas Crow had sent him to think. Good. Let him think it. They didn't speak for the first hour. That was fine. They had developed over 3 weeks a working relationship with silence that Clara would not have predicted on the train platform. The silences they kept now were not empty. They were the silences of 2 people who had enough to think about that they didn't need to fill the air between them with noise. It was Cole who spoke first. Tell me about your father. She looked at him. He was watching the road ahead. What made you ask that? She said. The way you said, my father built that fence when Crow's claim came in, Cole said. You said it like the fence was still his, like he was still in it somehow. Clara was quiet for a moment. The road moved under the horses. He died 4 years ago, she said. Lung sickness. It took 2 winters to do it, and he fought every day of both of them. She paused. He was not a large man. People underestimated him constantly. He had this way of being exactly as stubborn as the situation required, and not 1 degree more, never wasteful with it, never dramatic. Just absolutely immovable when it mattered. Sounds familiar, Cole said. She shot him a look. He kept his eyes on the road, but something at the corner of his mouth moved. He believed in the land, she continued, because saying it out loud felt important today, with the documents against her ribs and the fight ahead of them. Not just as property, as commitment, evidence, proof that you had put yourself somewhere and meant it. She looked at the horizon. He used to say that any man could pass through a place, but a person who worked the land was making a statement, that they were real, that they intended to stay. That's why you won't let go of it. That's one reason. She paused. The other reason is that it's mine and I worked for it and no one has the right to take it. Both reasons count, Cole said. She looked at him again. He had turned slightly toward her, just enough that she could see his profile, the scar catching the morning light, and his expression was not the carefully maintained neutrality she had catalogued in the first 2 weeks. It was something quieter than that, something that had stopped being careful and was just being present. What about you? She said. It surprised her slightly that she asked. She had been waiting for him to offer things rather than reaching for them. Where are you from? Actually from, not just the list of states. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Nebraska, he said. Small town that doesn't exist anymore. The railroad went a different direction, and the town just dissolved. People left. Buildings stayed empty. He paused. My father was a blacksmith. My mother taught school until there were no more children left to teach. Another pause. I left at 16 because there was nothing left to stay for. And then a long series of decisions that got worse before they got better, he said. It was flat, but not cold. The flatness of honesty rather than evasion. I was good at certain things, the kind of things that dangerous men value, and I found that out early, and I made choices based on it for a long time. Until James. He said it simply, a fact, a dividing line. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Clara said, He must have been something, to change the direction of a person like you. Cole thought about that. He was ordinary, he said, and the word came out with a weight that made ordinary sound like the rarest possible thing. Not special, not powerful, just consistent. He said the same things on the hard days that he said on the easy ones. He didn't adjust his principles for circumstances. A beat. I hadn't met many people like that. No, Clara said quietly. Neither have I. She didn't say anything else, neither did he. But the mile that followed had a different quality than the miles before it, and Clara noticed this without cataloging it, the way you notice a change in the air before you understand its cause. They reached Boulder by late afternoon and went directly to the federal land office before anything else. Cole's contact was a man named Arthur Webb, compact, precise, with the kind of organized desk that told you exactly what kind of mind lived behind it. He had been expecting them. Cole's wire had arrived and been taken seriously, which said something about the weight Cole's name still carried in certain offices. Something Clara filed away without comment. Webb looked at her documentation for 45 minutes without speaking, which she appreciated. A man who read before he talked was a man who could be worked with. When he looked up, his expression was careful. The original grant is clean, he said. Your family's 1861 territorial claim is unambiguous and properly registered. The Territorial Commerce Associates filing, he paused, organizing his words, has irregularities. What kind of irregularities? Clara said. The supporting deed they've referenced as predating your family's claim appears in our records, but the registration date is incorrect. The document they've submitted shows a filing of 1858, but the regional record shows 1863. He set the page down. Someone altered the date. The word altered sat in the office like something solid. Forgery, Cole said. That's a legal determination I'm not qualified to make at this desk, Webb said carefully. What I can tell you is that the dates don't match, and the discrepancy falls in your favor, Mrs. Maddox. He looked at Clara directly. If you file a formal contest with the regional office and provide the original family deed as counter-evidence, this claim will not survive scrutiny. Clara placed her hands flat on the desk. What's the timeline for a formal contest? Filed today, a preliminary review takes 10 to 14 days. If the examiner confirms the discrepancy, the competing claim is suspended pending full investigation. And during suspension, no action can be taken on the contested property, including any bank foreclosure proceedings tied to the land's status. Clara breathed. Just once, slowly, deliberately. File it today, she said. I have everything you need. Webb nodded and reached for his forms. Cole beside her said nothing, but his hand, the right one, the uninjured one, moved to the back of her chair, not touching her just there. Present. The way he had put his hand near the reins when the horses shied on the road 3 weeks ago. She didn't acknowledge it, but she didn't move away from it either. They stayed in Boulder that night at a rooming house near the Commerce District, 2 rooms side by side, with a shared wall that Clara was aware of in the same abstract way she was aware of many things about Cole Maddox, filed, cataloged, not examined, directly. She was reviewing her copies of the filed documents at the small desk in her room when the knock came. One knock measured. Come in, she said, because the only person it could be was the only person she would have admitted. He opened the door and stayed in the frame. He had a habit of that, presenting himself at thresholds rather than crossing them without invitation. She had started to think it was less a habit than a philosophy. Webb said something to me on the way out, he said, while you were talking to the clerk. She turned in the chair. Tell me. He said Crow has tried variations of this filing in 2 other counties in the last 18 months. One property owner settled, took money, and left. The other went to contest it, and then dropped the contest. Cole paused. Webb said the second man dropped it after his barn burned down. The room was quiet. Crow burns barns, Clara said. Crow creates circumstances in which people decide a piece of land isn't worth the trouble. Cole's jaw was set. It's not always fire. Sometimes it's something that can't be proved. A creditor calling in a debt at a bad time. A contract falling through. Enough pressure from enough directions that the person in the middle starts to feel like the land itself is the problem. Clara looked at him. She was running calculations she didn't particularly want to run. He'll know we filed. His man on the Delaney Road will have reported our departure, and Crow will connect it. Yes. Which means the barn isn't safe. Hector's there, Cole said. He knows what to watch for. I sent a wire before dinner. She nodded. What else? I want to go back tomorrow morning instead of the afternoon. Agreed. She looked at the documents in front of her, and then at Cole in the doorway. Something was moving in her, not fear, not quite. Something more active than fear. The cold, directed energy of a person who has finally identified the exact shape of the thing they are fighting and is orienting themselves toward it. He thought this would work the way it worked on the others, she said. He thought I'd be like the man who dropped his contest. Yes. He was wrong. Cole looked at her from the doorway, and his face in that moment was the most fully present she had ever seen it. Not just steady, engaged, the face of a man who was in something, not just managing it from a distance. I know, he said. She turned back to her documents. Good night, Cole. Good night, Clara. He closed the door. She heard him on the other side of the wall, the creak of movement, and then quiet, and she worked at the desk for another hour before she allowed herself to sleep. They were back at the ranch by mid-afternoon the next day. The barn was standing. Hector met them at the gate with his neutral face back in place, which told her nothing catastrophic had happened, but also that something had. Talk, she said. Cassidy came by this morning. Hector said. Official-like with two men she didn't recognize. Said he'd heard you'd gone to Boulder and wanted to check on the property. He paused. He walked the east fence line. Spent a long time looking at the gate access from the county road. He was assessing it, Cole said. Entry and exit points. Hector nodded once. I told him the property was in order, and that Mrs. Maddox would be back by afternoon and could receive him then if he had business. Another pause. He said he'd be back. Clara unsaddled her horse herself, which she always did when she needed to think, and she thought through the full shape of it while her hands worked. Cassidy assessing the property. Crow knowing they'd gone to Boulder. The barn that was standing but had been looked at too closely by too many strangers this morning. Hector, she said. From tonight, I don't want the east approach unattended after dark. You take first watch, Cole takes second. Is that workable? Yes, ma'am. And I want to know every person who comes down this road. Name, horse, direction of travel, everything. Hector nodded and went back to the yard. Cole was watching her. You're expecting them to move fast. Crow's timetable just changed, she said. We filed the contest. He knows his forged deed is under scrutiny. If he's going to make a move on this land before the regional examiner rules, he has maybe 10 days. She looked at Cole directly. I think he'll move in the next 5. So do I, Cole said. He didn't say it like it frightened him. He said it like it was the next thing on a list they were working through together. That steadied her. She hadn't expected to find that steadying hadn't expected another person's calm to work on her own the way it did. She had been her own source of calm for so long that finding it externally felt strange. Almost suspicious the way unfamiliar good things feel suspicious when you have gone without them long enough. I need to talk to Sheriff Briggs, she said. Cole looked at her. Briggs runs an honest office. Briggs is cautious and he doesn't like conflict, but he's not corrupt, she said. If I put the Webb filing in front of him, the date discrepancy, the forgery evidence, he can't ignore it. Especially if I frame it as potential federal land fraud, which it is. She paused. He won't love it, but he'll act on it. When? This afternoon. She was already moving. Before Cassidy comes back. Tom Briggs had the office of a man who had held the sheriff position long enough to feel permanent in it, which meant he had accumulated the particular comfort that comes with never expecting the situation to change significantly. Clara had always found this useful in small matters and limiting in large ones. He was not comfortable when she laid Elena's pages and the Webb filing on his desk. He read them the way Webb had carefully, thoroughly, which raised her estimation of him marginally. When he finished, he straightened the pages and set them in a precise stack and looked at her over his desk. This is a federal matter, he said. It's both, Clara said. The land claim is federal. The bank pressure is local. The man Crow has watching my east approach from the Delaney Road is local. Tom Cassidy walking my fence line uninvited this morning is local. She held Briggs's gaze. And if anyone touches my barn or my cattle or my property between now and when the federal examiner rules on my contest, that's very local. Briggs looked at Cole, who was sitting in the second chair with his hands resting on his knees, and his expression providing no particular reassurance to anyone in the room. You're Cole Maddox, Briggs said. Yes, Cole said. I know that name. Most people in your line of work do, Cole said without inflection. Should I be concerned about your presence in my county? You should be concerned about Silas Crow's presence in your county, Cole said. I'm just married to the woman whose land he's trying to take. Briggs looked at Clara. This banking connection is documented, Clara said. My cousin's name and office are on that page. The files are publicly registered. If you want to verify independently, you can wire the Denver Commerce office today. She paused. Or you can wait until something happens at my ranch and deal with it after the fact, but I don't think either of us wants that. A long silence. I'll have a deputy ride the Delaney Road, Briggs said. If there's a man camped there without business in the county, I can ask him to move on. He straightened in his chair. And I'll wire the federal land examiner's office to confirm your filing status, which will put Crow's people on notice that the local law is paying attention. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to make the next 5 days harder for Crow's operation than they would have been otherwise. "Thank you, Sheriff," Clara said, and she meant it. The 4th day after Boulder was when it escalated. She knew it the moment Hector came to find her at the water pump instead of waiting for her to come to him. Hector's emergency protocol was to find her wherever she was rather than making her come to the source, and he was using it now. "2 men at the east gate," he said. "Not Cassidy, different men. They have a paper they say is a sheriff's notice to vacate the east pasture pending land claim resolution." Clara's hands went still on the pump handle. "A sheriff's notice?" "Yes, ma'am. But Sheriff Briggs's deputy came by an hour ago and didn't say anything about it." She and Cole exchanged exactly one look. It was the look of 2 people arriving at the same conclusion at the same moment. "It's forged," Cole said. "Or Crow has another contact in Briggs's office," Clara said. She went to the east gate. She went calmly with her back straight and her pace measured because the 2 men at her gate were watching her come, and she wanted them to see someone who was not alarmed. They were city men, well dressed for the territory, which meant they were not from it. One of them had the paper. He extended it as she approached. She took it, read it again. It had Briggs's office letterhead. It had a signature that looked enough like Briggs's that a person who hadn't seen his handwriting before would not question it. It ordered her to remove her cattle from the east pasture within 48 hours, pending resolution of the competing land claim. "This notice is false," she said. The man who had handed it to her smiled. "Ma'am, I understand this is upsetting. I spoke with Sheriff Briggs in his office yesterday afternoon," she said. "He did not issue this notice. He told me he was monitoring the situation on my behalf." She folded the paper and held it. "So either you forged a county sheriff's document, which is a criminal matter, or someone in that office forged it without Briggs's knowledge, which is also a criminal matter." She looked at both men steadily. "Either way, you are standing at my gate with a false legal instrument, which means you need to leave before I decide what to do about that." The second man, the one who hadn't spoken, shifted his weight. It was a small shift, but she catalogued it. Not aggression. Assessment. He was deciding something. Cole appeared at her shoulder. She hadn't heard him come. He simply materialized the way he sometimes did, quiet and deliberate, and stood 2 steps behind her and slightly to the right. He didn't say anything. He didn't touch his holster. He didn't need to do either of those things. He simply stood where he was, and his presence on the ground behind her had the effect that such presences have when they belong to a certain kind of man in a certain kind of situation. The 2 men looked at him. The assessment in the second man's eyes completed itself in a direction that chose caution. "We'll be in touch," the first man said. "You'll be hearing from Sheriff Briggs," Clara said, "and from the Federal Land Examiner's office. Good afternoon." They left. She waited until they were out of the gate and moving down the road before she let herself breathe fully. "That was Crow's play," Cole said behind her. "Flush the cattle off the east pasture, occupy it with his own people, then claim your abandonment of the contested land as evidence that you didn't oppose the claim. If I'd moved the cattle, I would have handed him the argument." She turned. "I'm going to Briggs right now. I'll come with you." "Stay here," she said. It came out more firmly than she'd intended, and she saw a flicker of something in his face. "Hector can't watch both the east and the south approach alone. If those men come back tonight with different instructions—" "You're right," he said, immediately. No argument. She looked at him for a moment. The afternoon light was hard and direct. "Don't let anyone pass the east gate," she said. "Clara." His voice was quiet. "Go. I've got the ranch." She went. Briggs was furious in the contained way of a man whose professional authority has been used against him without his knowledge. The forged notice was as Clara had suspected. Not from his office, someone had used stolen letterhead, or a duplicate, or simply manufactured it, knowing Briggs's signature well enough to approximate it. He was on the wire to the county commissioner within 20 minutes of her showing it to him. He was also, for the first time since this had begun, angry enough to stop being cautious. "I want those 2 men identified and held for questioning," he told his deputy. "I want Tom Cassidy in this office tomorrow morning, and I want a wire sent to Denver's Territorial Commerce Registry tonight, flagging Crow's operation for coordinated fraud." He looked at Clara. "Is that the kind of local response you were looking for, Mrs. Maddox?" "That's exactly it," she said. She rode back to the ranch in the last of the afternoon light, and she was halfway up the road when she saw the smoke. It was not the barn. That was the first thing she determined from half a mile away, with the kind of desperate calculation that fear runs. The angle was wrong for the barn. The volume was wrong for a structure fire. Supply shed. She pushed the horse and came into the yard at a run and found Cole at the well, with a bucket line running him and Hector, and she realized with a jolt of startlement 3 of her neighbors who had apparently appeared from the road and simply joined in without asking. The supply shed was burning, half gone already, but contained. No spread to the barn or the main house. Cole looked at her when she came in. His face was dark with smoke and entirely composed. "Set deliberately," he said. "Rags in the corner, oil smell. Whoever did it went through the back fence and moved fast." "Anyone hurt?" "No." Hector saw the smoke before it caught the roof fully. She dismounted and went to help. There was nothing else to do. The shed was going to be a loss. She ran the calculation, even as she worked the cost of what was stored there, what could be salvaged, what would need to be replaced. But the barn was standing, and the house was standing, and everyone was on their feet. When it was out, and the bucket line had dissolved, and the neighbors had accepted her thanks and gone, she stood in the yard with Cole and Hector in the dusk and looked at the ruined shed. "He escalated," Cole said. "Yes," she said. "Clara." Something in his voice made her look at him. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before we went to Boulder, and I didn't because I was trying to handle it separately, and that was wrong." She waited. "The man on the Delaney Road," he said. "I recognized him. Not by name, by the way he was positioned, the way he watched. He's not just a scout." Cole's face was controlled, but underneath the control was something that she now recognized as guilt. The specific quality of guilt that belongs to a person who has withheld something they should have shared. "He's the kind of man Crow sends when he's done being subtle. I've been one of those men. I know what the assignment looks like." "What is the assignment?" "To make the person holding the land feel unsafe enough to leave it." Cole held her gaze. "Not to hurt anyone. Crow doesn't do that directly. It's too traceable. But to make the days feel so hard, so relentless, so full of small disasters." He gestured slightly at the ruined shed. "That eventually the person decides the land isn't worth the life it's costing them." Clara was quiet. "I should have told you the moment I recognized him," Cole said. "I thought I could manage it. I thought—" He stopped. "I didn't want to scare you more than you already were." She looked at him for a long moment. The smoking ruins behind her. The barn that was still standing. The house that was still hers. "Cole?" she said. He met her eyes. "I am not scared," she said. "I am angry. Those are different things, and I need you to understand the difference." She stepped toward him, not far, just enough that the space between them was the space of a real conversation between 2 people who were actually in the same fight. "And I need you to stop making decisions about what I can handle. I can handle everything. What I can't handle is being uninformed." He took that. He didn't deflect it or qualify it. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," she said. "Be honest. From now until this ends, I need all of it. Everything you know, everything you see, every recognition. We do this together, or we're doing 2 separate things at the same time, and that's how people get hurt." Something shifted in his face, deep below the controlled surface. The way a foundation shifts when weight is redistributed onto it, not breaking, settling. Finding its actual load. "Together," he said. "Yes," she said. Hector from somewhere diplomatically distant said he was going to check the barn roof for any caught embers and left them standing in the yard with the last of the evening fading out above them. "There's something else," Cole said. She waited. Crow will come himself. Not another letter, not another man on the road. He looked at her steadily. When his indirect methods don't work, and they're not working, he comes. He has to. Because the alternative is that someone stands up to his operation in a way the next target might hear about, and he can't allow that. A pause. "I know him. I know how he thinks. He'll be here within the week." Clara absorbed that, rolled it through the practical part of her mind, the part that managed the ranch, and made the hard decisions, and did not flinch from what the situation required. "Good," she said. Cole looked at her. "Good. I would rather face him directly than spend another week defending against things I can't see coming," she said. "Let him come. We'll be ready. She turned toward the house. The documents in the safe. The letter to Elena about the 4-county pattern. The wire she needed to send to the federal examiner's office first thing tomorrow morning. The list of things that needed doing was long, and she was going to work through all of them. She stopped at the porch step and looked back at Cole, who was still standing in the yard watching her with that new expression, the settled one, the one that had moved past, careful into something more honest than careful. "You said you came here to do one decent thing for a man who deserved better," she said. He nodded. "I think James would say you're doing considerably more than one decent thing." She held his gaze for a moment. "I think I'd agree with him." She went inside. Cole stood in the yard a moment longer. Then he picked up the water bucket from the ground beside the ruined shed, hung it back on the well post where it belonged, and went to check the east fence for the night. He had something to protect now. The understanding of that had been arriving in pieces over the past weeks, and it had fully arrived tonight, standing in the smoke-dark yard of a woman who was not afraid and not retreating and not asking him to fight her battles, only asking him to fight them beside her. He had not known until Clara Whitfield that particular request, not rescue but partnership, was the one he had been capable of answering all along. He walked the fence line in the dark. The east pasture was quiet. The cattle were settled. The gate was locked. Inside the house through the lit window, he didn't let himself look at. Too long he could see the lamp at the kitchen table, and the shape of a woman working, and the particular quality of purpose that some people carry like a light inside them, the kind that doesn't go out when things get hard. It only burns brighter. He made the full circuit of the fence and found it solid post by post, exactly as they had built it. He went to take his watch for the night, and somewhere in Denver, Silas Crow was reading a report from a man on the Delaney Road and making the decision that Cole had known was coming. The last move on the board was about to be made, and for the first time in 4 years, Cole Maddox was not the one making it. He was the one ready to answer it. Silas Crow arrived on a Wednesday. Clara knew it before Hector told her. The way you know a storm is coming not from the sky, but from the way the air changes its character entirely, something that had been theoretical becoming suddenly specifically real. She was at the kitchen table, going over the federal examiner's preliminary response, which had arrived that morning and which confirmed the date discrepancy in Crow's supporting deed, and placed his competing claim in formal suspension, when she heard the sound of horses coming down the main road at a pace that was neither casual nor urgent. Deliberate. The pace of a man who wants to be heard arriving. She folded the examiner's letter, put it in her pocket, stood up. Cole was already at the window. He had heard it before she had. "How many?" she said. "3 horses. Crow in the middle." A pause. "He brought witnesses, not muscle. That's important." "He's making this look legitimate," she said. "He thinks he still has a legitimate play." Cole turned from the window. His face was set controlled, but she could see the particular quality of attention in him that she had come to recognize as the version of himself he kept in reserve for situations that required his full capacity. "He doesn't know about the examiner's letter yet." "Then we have an advantage," Clara said. "Yes." He looked at her. "Let me do the opening." She considered this for exactly 2 seconds. Why? Because he came for me first. If I step out and he thinks this is still between him and me, he'll talk longer than he means to. He'll try to negotiate. Cole held her gaze. And when he negotiates, he reveals his position. Clara thought about it. Thought about the man she had been 3 weeks ago, the one who would have said firmly that she handled her own front gate. Thought about the difference between handling something alone and handling it together. "All right," she said. "You open. I'll be right behind you." He nodded and went to the door. Silas Crow was not what Clara had built in her mind. She had constructed over the past weeks a version of him that matched his methods. Cold, deliberate, the kind of man who had filed the cruelty out of himself in the service of efficiency. And he was those things. She could see it in the way he sat his horse, and the quality of his clothing, and the careful blankness of his expression. But he was also unexpectedly older than she had imagined. Somewhere past 60, with the kind of face that had once been handsome and had thinned into something harder, the way certain materials harden under repeated stress. He looked at Cole the way a man looks at property that has wandered off. "Cole," he said. The tone of it familiar, almost warm, the tone of a man who had decided to begin from a position of reasonableness, made something in Clara's chest tighten with a cold, specific anger. "Crow," Cole said. He was standing on the porch, one step down from the door, and his posture was the most fully still she had ever seen it, not relaxed, contained. "It's been a while," Crow said. 4 years. 4 years! Crow let that sit for a moment, as if it were a shared memory rather than the length of time Cole had been free of him. "You look settled." "I am settled." Crow's eyes moved past Cole and found Clara on the porch. He assessed her with the same efficiency he probably brought to all his assessments, quick, thorough, and with an air of having already reached a conclusion. "Mrs. Maddox," he said with the kind of courtesy that comes without warmth. "I apologize that our first meeting is under these circumstances." "No, you don't," Clara said pleasantly. A beat. Something shifted in Crow's expression, not offense, but a recalibration. He had expected a different kind of woman. "I understand the land contest has created some tension," he said, returning to Cole. "That was never my intention." "What was your intention?" Cole said. "To have a conversation I should have had 4 years ago." Crow shifted in the saddle. He had the ease of a man who had spent his life on horseback and who knew how to use that ease. "Cole, what we built together, the work you did, the reputation you earned, I'm not here to threaten that. I'm here because there are opportunities I can't fill without the right people, and you are the right people." "I'm a rancher," Cole said. A slight pause. "You're a man with particular skills living on a woman's property in a town that doesn't know what to do with him." He said it gently, as if he were offering a kindness. "I know what to do with him. I always did." Clara felt Cole go very still beside her. Not the good stillness, the one that came from discipline and peace, but the other kind. The kind a man goes when something strikes exactly where the doubt lives. She stepped forward. She didn't do it dramatically. She simply moved from slightly behind Cole to beside him, which changed the geometry of the porch entirely. "Mr. Crow," she said, "you've filed a land claim against my east pasture using a document with a forged date. The Federal Land Examiner's Office in Boulder has confirmed the discrepancy and placed your claim in formal suspension pending investigation. Sheriff Briggs has a report in front of the county commissioner documenting the forged notice you sent to my gate last week. And my cousin in Denver has compiled a record of identical operations in 4 other counties that creates a pattern of federal land fraud." She reached into her pocket and held up the examiner's letter. "This is the preliminary ruling, if you'd like to read it." The silence that followed was of a particular quality. One of the 2 men flanking Crow shifted on his horse. Crow himself did not move, but something behind his eyes did a rapid, invisible reorganization, the kind that happens when a man who has always controlled the information in a situation discovers he does not control it today. "You've been thorough," he said, and the warmth in his voice had contracted by several degrees. "I'm a rancher," Clara said. "Thorough is how we survive. Crow looked at Cole. The kindness was gone from his face, now replaced by something more honest and considerably less pleasant. "You brought this on yourself," he said. "You left without, there were obligations." "There were no obligations," Cole said. His voice was flat. "There was a job. I left the job. Men don't simply leave. I did." Cole held his gaze without any visible effort. "And I'm not going back. And you are standing on my wife's land making threats that your operation can no longer afford to make because the federal examiner's office is now watching everything with your name on it." He paused. "Go home, Silas." Crow looked at him for a long moment. Clara watched it happen, watched the man calculate, revise, calculate again. He was not a fool. Fools did not build operations of this scale and sustain them across 4 counties. He was reading the situation with the same efficiency he read everything, and the situation was saying something he did not want to hear. "This isn't finished," Crow said. But the texture of it had changed. It was not a threat. It was closer to what men say when they are leaving and do not want to appear to be retreating, which is its own kind of retreat. "Yes, it is," Clara said. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he turned his horse. The 3 of them rode back down the main road at the same deliberate pace they had come in at, and Clara stood on the porch and watched them go and did not move until they were through the gate and out of sight. The silence after they left was the loudest thing she had heard in weeks. Hector materialized from the direction of the barn with the specific timing of a man who had been positioned to assist if needed and was now standing down. He looked at Clara. She gave him a slight nod, which was their shorthand for handled "thank you. Go about your work," and he went. She turned to Cole, too. He was still looking at the road where Crow had gone. His jaw was set and his hands were at his sides, and she could see in the line of his shoulders that the conversation had cost him something, not the ending of it, which had gone as well as anything could have gone, but the middle of it. The particular moment when Crow had described him as a man with skills living on a woman's property. She had seen what that landed on. "Cole," she said. He turned. "What he said," she said, "about you living on my property, about being the right kind of man for his operation." He was quiet. "He was trying to find where the doubt lived," she said. "He does it deliberately. He spent years learning exactly where to put pressure to make people feel small enough to need what he was offering." She looked at him directly. "Don't let him have that." Something moved in Cole's face. "He wasn't entirely wrong," he said, "about not knowing what to do with me. The town doesn't know what to do with half the people in it," Clara said. "That's the town's limitation, not yours." She stepped toward him. "You fixed every broken thing on this ranch before anyone asked you to. You woke up before sunrise every day for 3 weeks and worked beside me and Hector, without complaint and without ego. You stood between me and Crow's methods when it would have been easier to leave. And you were honest with me when I asked for honesty, even when it cost you something to be." She stopped 2 feet from him. Close enough that this was not a general statement to the porch air, but a specific statement to him. "I know what to do with you," she said. "You stay." He looked at her for a long moment. The afternoon light was direct, and there was nowhere to put his face that wasn't visible to her, and she thought that was perhaps useful, that he couldn't manage his expression the way he normally did, because there was no shadow to put it in, nothing to look down at or away toward. "Clara," he said. "Yes," she said. "What we said last night, in the yard, about doing this together." "Yes. I need you to know." He stopped, started again. "I need you to know that this isn't, I'm not staying because of the legal arrangement. The deed, the bank situation, all of it. That's not—" He stopped a second time, and the stopping was so unlike him, so far from his normal economy and precision, that it told her everything the stopped sentences were trying to say. "I know," she said. "Do you?" "Yes." She held his gaze. "I know. And I need you to know the same is true for me," he breathed. Just once slowly, the way she had breathed in Webb's office in Boulder when the examiner said the words "falls in your favor," the breath of a person releasing something they had been holding for longer than was comfortable. "All right," he said. "Good," she said. She went back inside to write the follow-up letter to the federal examiner's office, because there was still work to do, and Silas Crow was not entirely handled, and she was not the kind of person who confused a retreat with a conclusion. But something had settled in the house. Something that had been coiled and uncertain since the train platform had found in the space of the last 5 minutes a place to rest. The blow came 2 days later from a direction she hadn't fully guarded. It was Cassidy who delivered it, which was appropriate, and he did it with the particular efficiency of a man who knows he is making a last move and wants it to land cleanly. He came to the ranch himself. No pretense of neighborly interest, this time no men flanking him. Just Cassidy on his horse at her front gate at 7 in the morning with a document she didn't recognize. She went out alone. Cole appeared at the porch door, and she held up one hand, the brief gesture that meant, "Wait," and he waited, which still surprised her, the simple fact of a man who could wait when she asked him to. "Tom," she said. "Clara." He had the document in his hand. He didn't offer it immediately, which meant he wanted to talk first, which meant he wanted something from the conversation beyond the delivery. "I want you to know I didn't know Crow was going to burn your shed." She looked at him. "But you knew about the forged notice?" A slight pause. "I knew he was going to make a legal move. You provided him with information about my financial situation, my bank timeline, my movements." She kept her voice level. "For how long, Tom?" He looked away briefly. That was its own kind of answer. "He approached me 18 months ago, said he had a development interest in this area, wanted to understand the land landscape. And you told him about my father's loan." "I told him what everyone in the county knows." "You told him in exchange for what?" Another pause. Longer. "A preferred buyer position on your east pasture when it was available." The clarity of that, the plain, simple transactional reality of it, was almost easier to deal with than something more complicated would have been. Tom Cassidy had not done this out of malice. He had done it out of opportunity. He had seen a chance to get the land he'd been after for 2 years, and he had decided that the cost of participating in Crow's method was worth the result. She had not liked Cassidy, but she had not thought him capable of this particular calculation. She was revising. "The document," she said. He held it out. She took it. It was not from Crow's operation. It was from the bank from the territorial lending institution that held her father's loan. And it was not a foreclosure notice. It was a demand for immediate full settlement of the outstanding loan principal called due under a clause in the original loan agreement that allowed the bank to demand full payment if the property value became materially disputed. The competing land claim, even in suspension, had triggered the clause. $2,040, due in 30 days. She read it twice. Then she folded it with steady hands and looked at Cassidy. "How much did he pay you?" she said. Cassidy's jaw moved. "Clara, how much, Tom?" A long beat. $500, and the preferred buyer position. She nodded once. "Leave my property," she said. "Clara, I can help you. If you sell the east pasture to me now at fair market." "Leave my property," she said again, with a patience that cost her more than anger would have. He left. She went inside. She stood in the kitchen and looked at the demand notice on the table and ran the numbers the way she ran numbers when she didn't want to run them quickly, precisely, without the mercy of rounding. She did not have $2,040. She did not have half of that. Everything liquid she had was tied to the operating costs of the ranch for the next 3 months. She had investment in cattle that wouldn't pay out until spring. She had the land itself, which was her primary asset, and which was currently in the middle of a contested claim that complicated any attempt to leverage it. She heard Cole come in from the porch. She handed him the notice without speaking. He read it. She watched his face. He was very controlled, but the control was working harder than usual. 30 days, he said. "Yes. The examiner's suspension doesn't affect the loan clause." "No, the bank and the federal land office are separate processes." She sat down. He knew about the clause. Crow, he knew the structure of my father's loan. Cassidy told him. She pressed her fingers against the table. The competing claim was never going to hold up to scrutiny. He probably knew it wouldn't. But he didn't need it to hold up. He needed it to exist long enough to trigger the loan clause. She looked up at Cole. The claim was the tool. The loan was the weapon. Cole set the notice down. He looked at her steadily. How much time did you have on the loan before all of this? 7 months, maybe 8 if the spring cattle sale was good. And now you have 30 days. Yes. He pulled the other chair out and sat down across from her. Not beside her, across from her, which was the position of a person who wants to look at your face when you talk. Tell me what options exist, he said. All of them. Don't edit for what you think I can help with. She looked at him. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window, and it was an ordinary morning light, the same as every other morning, and she thought about how strange it was that ordinary things continued to be ordinary in the middle of situations that felt anything but. I can try to negotiate with the bank, she said. Ask for a payment plan against the full balance. It's unlikely the clause puts them in a strong legal position, but it's not impossible if I go in with documentation showing the claim against the property is in federal suspension. What else? I can sell cattle ahead of schedule. Spring prices are better, but I can move some now. That gets me maybe $400, possibly $5. What else? She looked at him. I can ask Elena to pull the full documentation on Crow's banking relationship with this institution and take it to the Territorial Commissioner's office as evidence of coordinated fraud. If the bank's loan call was made at Crow's direction, using a manufactured trigger, that's potentially criminal. She paused. But that process takes longer than 30 days. What else? Cole said. She met his eyes. There is no fourth option, Cole. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Yes, there is. She waited. I have money, he said. Set aside. Not from the ranch, from before. The years I worked for Crow, the years before that. I didn't spend much. I had nowhere to spend it and no reason to. He held her gaze without any particular drama, as if this were simply information being transferred, which was how he handled most things that were not simple at all. Enough to cover the full balance and leave the operating costs intact. Clara was very still. No, she said. Clara. No, she said again. That is not. She stopped. Organized herself. That money is yours. That is your security. You are not spending your life savings on my father's loan. Our father's loan, he said quietly. It's our property on the deed, our loan on the land. The word our sat between them on the kitchen table like something she needed a moment to pick up. It started as a legal arrangement, she said. I know what it started as, he said. I also know what it is now, which is the same thing written differently. He leaned forward slightly. Clara, listen to me. Not as a business partner. As... He stopped. Something moved across his face. As the man who is sitting in your kitchen because he wants to be here, and not because he promised a dead friend he would be. She looked at him. Let me do this, he said. Not for the arrangement, not for the deed, for the ranch, for what you've built and what your father built and what we are going to keep building. His voice was entirely even. Let me be what I came here to be. She sat with that for a long moment. The notice on the table. The kitchen that had become over 3 weeks a room she associated with his presence. His coffee cup in the same place every morning. His voice across the table in the evenings. The knock on the frame before he entered. She thought about what her father had said about the land. That working it was evidence. Proof that you intended to stay. She looked at Cole Maddox across the table. This is a loan, she said. Between partners. I will pay back every dollar when the spring sale clears. Something in his face shifted. Clara. Those are the terms, she said. I am not a woman who accepts gifts without accounting for them. It is a loan between partners at no interest because you are not a bank, and I will pay it back, and we will not argue about this. He looked at her for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved. All right. Those are the terms. I heard you the first time. Good. She picked up her pencil. Write down the amount, and I'll add it to the accounts. He told her the amount. She wrote it down. Her hand was perfectly steady. She was not going to let it not be steady. They went to the bank the following morning. Clara had the examiner's suspension notice the loan demand, and enough of Elena's documentation to present the beginning of a case for coordinated fraud, which she laid out in front of the bank manager. A careful man named Leonard Foss, who had the look of someone who had recently begun to suspect he had been used in a scheme he didn't fully understand. She was not unkind to Foss. He was a small piece of a larger arrangement, and there was nothing to be gained from making him feel attacked. She simply put the information in front of him and let it tell its own story, which it did effectively. By the end of the meeting, Foss had agreed to accept full settlement of the loan balance and to flag the account for a review of any communications between the bank and Territorial Commerce Associates over the preceding 2 years. Clara wrote the check. Cole's money rendered into her handwriting, settling her family's debt. She wrote it with the same steady hand, and she handed it across the desk, and she did not allow herself to feel what that moment actually cost her until they were outside and on the street. Then she stopped walking. Cole stopped beside her. "I know," he said before she could find words for it. She looked at him. "It was supposed to be mine," she said. "The final payment. That was supposed to be mine." "It is yours," he said. "The ranch is yours. The payment is from the ranch. The only difference is the timing." She pressed her lips together. "That's a very tidy way to put it." "It's the true way to put it." He looked at her steadily. "Your father built it. You kept it. We're going to finish it. The money is a detail." She breathed. "Let the morning air do its work." "You are better at this than you think you are," she said. He looked slightly puzzled. "At what?" "At saying the right thing." She started walking again. "Don't let it go to your head." He fell into step beside her, and she thought she heard just faintly that sound again, the almost laugh, the involuntary one, the real one. She did not comment on it. She was smiling too, just slightly. She kept that private. The Territorial Commissioner's Office responded to Elena's fraud documentation 9 days after the Boulder filing. The response was not a letter. It was 2 federal officers who arrived in Willow Creek on a Thursday and went directly to Sheriff Briggs's office, and then to the bank, and then to a meeting with Clara and Cole at Harvey Dunn's law office that lasted 4 hours and covered every document she had compiled over the past 3 weeks. At the end of it, the lead officer, a composed man named Patterson, who had the manner of someone who had handled similar cases and found them professionally unremarkable, looked at Clara across Dunn's desk and said, "The pattern you've identified is consistent with cases we've been building across 3 territories. The forged deed, the manufactured loan trigger the use of local intermediaries. It matches the Crow operation in specifics that will be actionable." "What does actionable mean in terms of timeline?" Clara said. "Federal indictment is a longer process than you'd like," Patterson said. "But a cease and desist on all outstanding land claims filed under Territorial Commerce Associates can be issued within 2 weeks of our return to the regional office. That would affect 4 counties. And the competing claim on my east pasture, the suspension becomes permanent dismissal under federal order." He paused. "Mrs. Maddox, you've done more of our work for us than most witnesses manage. Your cousin's compilation alone consolidated what would have taken us 3 months of independent research." "She's thorough," Clara said. "It runs in the family." Patterson almost smiled. "So I see." Cole beside her said nothing for the duration of the meeting. He had positioned himself as he often did in rooms where Clara was the relevant party, present, attentive, and entirely willing to be background. She had stopped finding this surprising. She had come to understand it as a form of respect that was so fundamental to how he operated that it didn't feel like a choice so much as a character. When the officers left, Dunn looked at them both over his desk with an expression that mixed professional satisfaction with something more personal. "I've been a land attorney in this county for 22 years, he said. "I've seen a dozen operations like Crow's work this territory without consequence." A pause. I'm glad this one found a different outcome. Thank you, Harvey, Clara said. She and Cole walked out into the afternoon. The same street where Crow had ridden in and ridden out. The same town that had watched her arrive at the train platform weeks ago to meet a husband who never came. She looked at it with the different eyes. She had now not changed eyes, not softened eyes, but eyes that had the full context of everything that had happened since the 16th of August, and understood the street as a place she had fought for, rather than simply a place she lived in. It's not finished, Cole said beside her. The indictment process. I know, she said. But the claim is gone. The loan is settled. The bank is under review. She looked at him. The ranch is safe. He looked at her. The ranch is safe, he confirmed. She breathed the afternoon air in. Let it out. Come on, she said. Hector's going to have the south fence to deal with alone if we don't get back. They walked to the horses. She reached hers first and was tightening the saddle when Cole said her name. Not in the way he said it, when he had information. The other way, the quieter way, the one that had been appearing more frequently, and that she had been collecting in the private place where she kept things that were hers. She turned. He was standing with his horse's reins in his hand, and his face was doing the thing it did when he was about to say something that had moved past the edge of what he normally allowed himself. I need to tell you something, he said. She waited. What I said on the porch when Crow was here, about not being the man with skills living on your property. He paused. Crow was wrong about what I am, but he wasn't wrong that I didn't know who I was when I came here. He looked at her steadily. I know now. Being here working beside you, fighting this with you, I know who I am now in a way I didn't before. She looked at him. The afternoon light was behind him, and his face was clear in it, the scar and all. And she thought again what she had thought the first time she had looked at him without alarm. That it was simply part of his face, simply part of the record of a life that had made its way, with difficulty and cost, toward something better. Who are you? She said. He met her eyes. A rancher in Willow Creek, he said. Married to Clara Whitfield, still learning the south fence. Something in her chest moved with a warmth she did not try to manage or contain or file away for later examination. She let it be there. She let it be real. You are not the worst thing you ever did, she said. It came out quietly. She hadn't known she was going to say exactly that until she said it. But it was the truest thing she had for him in that moment, and she gave it without qualification. His face in the full light of the afternoon was entirely unguarded for the first time since the train platform. The controlled surface he carried like a second coat was simply gone, and what was underneath was not what she had expected in August, and was exactly what she had come to know in October. A man, real and present, and here. Thank you, he said. That was all. It was enough. She turned and mounted her horse. He mounted his. They rode back to the ranch in the afternoon light side by side, not quite touching the space between them, easy and warm, and full of everything that had been built there post by post in the weeks since August. Behind them, Willow Creek continued about its business. Ahead of them, the ranch waited the south fence, and the evening count, and the accounts on the kitchen table, and the kitchen lamp that would burn late, and the 2 cups of coffee that had become, without either of them announcing it, simply the way mornings worked. Clara rode with the weight of what had been settled, sitting lightly on her, the way things sit when they are finally in their right place. The loan was paid. The claim was gone. The man riding beside her was not going anywhere. She had not ordered this. She had not planned for it. She had planned for a farmer with kind eyes and a quiet manner. And she had gotten instead a man with a scar and a complicated past, and an absolute unwavering capacity for the specific kind of decency that doesn't announce itself. She thought her father would have approved of that. She thought James Aldrich, wherever he was, had known exactly what he was doing. She thought she might tell Cole that someday. Not today. Today the south fence was waiting, and the cattle needed counting, and there would be time in the long evenings that were coming for everything that still needed saying. There was time. That she thought riding through the October afternoon with the man she had not expected and could not now imagine the ranch without was perhaps the best thing of all. There was time. The south fence took 3 days. Not because the work was more than 2 people could handle, but because the damage was more extensive than they had initially assessed. Crow's man on the Delaney Road had not just watched it turned out. On his way out, he had cut wire in 4 places along the southern boundary. Clean cuts designed to look like weathering, the kind of small malicious act a person commits when they know they are losing, but want to leave something behind anyway. Clara found the first cut herself on the morning after they returned from Harvey Dunn's office. She stood at the break in the wire with her hands on her hips and felt the specific cold anger of discovering that the retreating side had taken one more shot on the way out. Then she went back to the barn, got the wire kit, and started fixing it. Cole found her at the 3rd post. He didn't say anything about why she hadn't waited for help. He simply picked up the other side of the wire and held it taut while she worked the splice. And they moved down the line together, without discussion, the way they had come to move through most things, in parallel, in rhythm, with the easy efficiency of 2 people who had learned each other's pace. 4 cuts, she said when they found the last one. He wanted to make sure you knew he'd been there, Cole said. He wanted to leave me with something to fix. She finished the splice, tested it with both hands, solid. He didn't understand that fixing things is what I do. Cole looked at her over the fence wire. No, he said. He didn't understand that at all. They finished the south fence by Thursday afternoon. Hector walked the full line the next morning and confirmed every splice was holding and every post was solid, which he reported to Clara with the brevity of a man who considers sound work its own complete statement. The ranch breathed differently that week. Clara noticed it in herself first, a loosening somewhere behind her sternum, of something she had held compressed for so long it had stopped feeling like tension and had started feeling like structure. She had to relearn in those first days after the loan was settled and the claim was gone, and Crow's men had left the county, how to move through her own days without the constant background calculation of what was coming and what it would cost to survive it. It was stranger than she'd expected. She had thought relief would feel simple. It felt like putting down a weight you've carried so long that your arms don't know what to do with the space. The letter from Patterson's office arrived 2 weeks after the Boulder filing. It was 2 pages formal, addressed to Mrs. Clara Maddox Whitfield Ranch, Willow Creek, Colorado Territory. And it confirmed in the measured language of federal documentation that the competing claim filed by Territorial Commerce Associates against the East Pasture had been permanently dismissed under federal order. All associated filings in 4 counties had been suspended pending the ongoing investigation. Silas Crow had been formally notified. Clara read it at the kitchen table. Cole was across from her with his coffee, and he watched her read it, and when she set it down he looked at her face and waited. "It's done," she said. He nodded once. She looked at the letter. Then at the table. Then at her own hands, which were the hands of a woman who had spent 3 years holding a ranch together alone, and had spent the last 2 months holding it together differently with someone beside her, which had turned out to be not a compromise, but a revelation. "I want to plant the kitchen garden again," she said. Cole looked at her, not quite sure he'd followed the turn. "My mother planted it the first year they had the ranch," Clara said. "It died 2 winters ago. I didn't have the time to maintain it, and the drought took what I couldn't give attention to." She looked up. "I want to put it back. This spring." "All right," Cole said. "I'm telling you, because it'll take both of us for the initial bed preparation," she said. "The soil in that section hasn't been worked in 2 years." "I'll be there," he said. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his. Outside, the October morning was doing what October mornings did in Colorado, pressing cold and clear against everything. "Cole," she said. He looked at her. "Thank you." She said it plainly without construction or qualification. "For coming, for staying, for—" She paused and he waited with the patience she had come to rely on, for being the kind of man who kept a promise to someone who wasn't alive to know he kept it. Something moved through Cole's face, slowly, like light through cloud. James would have come himself if he could have, he said. I was the second best version of that. No, Clara said. You were the right version. I don't think I would have known what to do with James Aldrich. She held Cole's gaze. I knew what to do with you. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What did you do with me? She considered. Kept you, she said, and went back to her coffee. The morning continued around them, ordinary and real, and entirely precisely what it was supposed to be. The first snow came in early November. Not a serious snow. The serious ones came later in January and February, the ones that required real preparation and real vigilance. This was the first snow, the one that was more announcement than event, a few inches of white, that the afternoon sun would reduce to mud by 3 o'clock. Clara stood on the porch and watched it come down, and felt something she hadn't felt in so long she had to search for the name of it. She felt content, not happy exactly though she was, that she was discovering more than she had been in years. Not relieved, though she was also that. Something quieter than either of those. The particular quality of a person who has found themselves without quite planning it exactly where they are supposed to be. She heard Cole come out behind her. He stood at her shoulder and looked at the snow and didn't say anything, which was still her favorite thing about him. The absolute absence of compulsion to fill every silence with evidence that he was present. He was present without needing to announce it. First snow, she said. Yes. My father always said the first snow was the ranch asking if you were ready, she said. Are we? She thought about the south fence fully repaired. The supply shed already half rebuilt with lumber they'd sourced from the county mill. The cattle moved to the north pasture where the windbreak would give them cover through the worst months. The accounts balanced for the first time in 3 years without a foreclosure notice somewhere in the column. The loan paid, the east pasture legally, and finally hers. Yes, she said. We're ready. Cole made a small sound beside her. Agreement? Satisfaction. Something between the two. She was aware, standing there in the first snow, with his shoulder a few inches from hers, that she had things she wanted to say that she had not yet said. Not because she was afraid of them, she had moved past afraid some weeks ago, somewhere between the boulder filing and the south fence in the accumulation of ordinary days that had turned out to be the most important evidence she had ever gathered. But because she was a woman who did not say things until she was sure of them, and she was sure of them now, and the snow seemed in its quiet way like an appropriate moment. I need to tell you something, she said. He turned slightly toward her. When James's letter said you were the most trustworthy man he'd ever known, she said, I read it the way a person reads a reference from someone they've never met about someone they've never met. I gave it appropriate weight, which is to say, I filed it and decided to verify it for myself. She paused. I've verified it. And, he said. He was right, she said. And I want you to know that I know that. Not because of the loan, not because of the fence, not because of Crow. Because of every morning for 2 months when you showed up and did the work without making it a performance. Because you told me the truth when it would have been easier not to. Because when I said this is business, you treated it like business, and when it stopped being only business, you waited until I knew it before you said so. She looked at him directly. That is a rare thing. I don't know if you understand how rare. Cole held her gaze. The snow was coming down around them with the soft indifference of weather. I want to say something back, he said. Go ahead. I came here to keep a promise, he said. I told you that on the first day. What I didn't tell you, what I didn't know yet, is that I was looking for something and didn't have a name for it. He paused. A reason. Not a job, not a direction, a reason. Something that made the next day matter beyond just getting through it. He looked at her with the full, unguarded expression that she had come to understand was the most honest thing about him. You're the reason. The ranch is part of it, and Hector is part of it, and the work is part of it. But you are the center of it. I need you to know that. The snow fell. The morning was very quiet. I know, she said. That's why I said what I said. She held his gaze. We should go in. There's work to do. He nodded. But neither of them moved for another moment, and the snow came down on the ranch that was hers, that was theirs, and the morning held them both in the particular grace of a thing that has been fought for and won, and is now finally simply itself. Then she went in. He followed. The door closed behind them. It was Hector who noticed first, which was appropriate, because Hector noticed everything, and simply chose what to comment on with a discrimination that Clara had always respected. He came to her 2 weeks into November with his neutral face in place, but with something underneath it that she identified after a moment as the specific pleasure of a man who has watched something develop from the beginning and feels entitled to a degree of quiet satisfaction about the outcome. Cole fixed the weather vane, he said. Clara looked at him. The weather vane has been broken for 2 years. Yes, ma'am. She waited. He fixed it this morning before sunrise, Hector said. Didn't say anything about it, just did it. A pause. Like he's planning to be here long enough for the weather vane to matter. Clara looked at Hector for a long moment. He looked back at her with the equanimity of a man who has made his point and has no interest in belaboring it. Good, she said. It needed fixing. Yes, ma'am, Hector said, and went back to work with the air of a man fully satisfied with how the conversation had gone. Clara went and looked at the weather vane. It was moving the way weather vanes are supposed to move freely, precisely reading the wind without sticking. Someone had replaced the rusted pin and realigned the compass points, and oiled the bracket, all the work that had been on her mental list for 2 years, and had always been displaced by something more urgent. She stood in the yard and looked at it for a moment. Then she went to find Cole, who was in the barn doing the morning feed, and she stood in the barn door and said, "The weather vane." He looked at her over the back of one of the horses. Pin was rusted through. It needed a new one. You did it before sunrise. I was up anyway. She looked at him. He looked back at her with perfect calm, the way he always looked at her directly, without performance, without any particular awareness that he had done something worth remarking on. Cole, she said. Yes. I'm going to say something, and I need you to let me finish it before you respond. He set the feed bucket down, gave her his full attention, which was something he gave in a way that was different from other people's full attention, more complete, somehow more present. All right. When I put that advertisement in the Territorial Marriage Agency, she said, I wrote out exactly what I needed, a partner, someone to share the legal burden of the deed, a man of honest character who could work and would respect the terms of a practical arrangement. She paused. I was very specific. I was specific because I had been disappointed before, and I had learned that specificity was a form of protection. If you name what you need precisely enough, you don't accidentally want something you didn't ask for. Cole was very still. I named what I needed, she said, and I got everything I asked for and nothing I specified. She held his gaze. You are nothing like the letter I wrote. You are not a farmer. You are not quiet or gentle in the way I described. You came with a gun and a past and a promise that was not mine to receive, and you have been every day since the train platform exactly and precisely what this ranch needed and what I needed, and I did not know either of those things when I wrote that letter. She stopped. The barn was quiet. The horses moved behind Cole with the patient indifference of animals who do not track human conversation. I wasn't finished, she said. He waited. I have spent 2 months being careful, she said, which is what I do. I am a careful woman. I verify before I trust, and I hold things at a measured distance until I'm sure of them, and I have been sure of you for longer than I have let on. She breathed. So I am telling you now clearly, because I do not believe in keeping ledgers with people who matter. You matter. Not the arrangement, not the deed, not the loan, which you will still receive payment for in the spring, and I will hear no argument about it. You, the man who fixed the weather vane before sunrise because he was up anyway, that man matters to me, considerably. The barn held the silence. Cole looked at her. The full, unguarded look. The one she had seen on the porch in the snow, and at the kitchen table, and at the federal land office, and on the day Crow had tried to make him feel like a tool that had wandered off its workbench. He crossed the barn in 3 steps. He stopped directly in front of her, close the closest they had stood since that first moment on the train platform, but entirely different in character. Not confrontation. The opposite of confrontation. "Clara Whitfield," he said. "Maddox," she corrected. "For the legal record." Something broke through his face, the real laugh, not the almost laugh, not the involuntary small sound she had collected privately over 2 months. A full, actual laugh, brief and genuine, and so unexpected that it startled them both. Then it settled, and he was looking at her with an expression she recognized because she had seen it building for weeks and had been waiting in her careful way for it to arrive completely. "I am going to say something," he said. "Go ahead. I have not been in one place long enough to call it mine since I was 16 years old," he said. "I have not had a reason to stay anywhere or a person I was staying for or a day that felt like it was building toward something rather than just getting through to the next one." He paused. "This ranch is mine. You are mine. Not by law and not by arrangement, because I have chosen it and I am choosing it every morning when I get up before sunrise, and I will choose it every morning for as long as you will allow me to." She looked at him steadily. "That is a long time." "Yes," he said. "It is." She reached up and put her hand against his jaw, the side with the scar deliberately, because she was done pretending she didn't know it was there, and done treating it as something to navigate around. It was his face. She held it. "All right," she said. "Then stay." He covered her hand with his, the scarred left hand over hers. She felt the old injury in it, the slightly different way. The bones had healed. And she thought about everything that hand had been through to arrive at this particular barn, on this particular November morning. And she thought it had arrived exactly where it was supposed to. He leaned down. She stayed exactly where she was. The winter was the best one the ranch had seen in 4 years, not because of the weather. The weather was exactly as hard as Colorado winters are, which is to say, uncompromising, demanding, and entirely indifferent to human preference. The cattle required daily attention. The pipes needed wrapping twice in December, and once again in January, when the temperature dropped past anything the almanac had suggested. The supply shed half rebuilt before the snow was finished by February, with lumber they'd hauled in a sled, because the wagon was impractical, Hector and Cole working the frame while Clara handled the interior organization and the accounts for the new construction. It was the best winter because of how it was spent. Not alone. The kitchen table had 2 sides in use every evening, accounts and planning, and occasionally reading Clara with the ranch books, and Cole with whatever he was working through, which turned out to include a serious and apparently long-standing interest in territorial law that she had not expected and found deeply useful. He had the habit of a man who had spent years needing to understand the rules of the world he operated in, and he turned that habit now toward the kind of knowledge that built things rather than the kind that navigated around them. They talked more in the evenings than Clara had talked to another person in years. Not idle talk, neither of them was built for idle, but the kind of talk that goes somewhere, that picks up a thread from the morning and follows it somewhere new by the time the lamp was turned down. Cole had opinions about land management that came from a different angle than hers, formed in a different kind of experience, and the friction of 2 different perspectives on the same problem turned out to produce better solutions than either of them would have reached alone. She told him about her mother one evening in January, for the first time since she had stopped being able to talk about her mother without the grief pulling too hard. She told him about the kitchen garden and the way her mother had talked to the plants while she worked, not in the way of a person who believed plants could hear, but in the way of a person for whom the work was a form of prayer. And Cole had listened without filling the space, and had said at the end that he thought the garden should go back in, not just for the practical reasons, but because some things deserve to continue regardless of what they cost to maintain. She had not been able to respond to that for a moment. She had gone back to the accounts, and he had gone back to his reading, and the lamp had burned between them, and she had thought that she was going to spend a very long time being glad about the way this had happened. The twist that February brought was not from Crow, who had retreated entirely into the federal investigation process and had stopped being a practical presence in Clara's life, reduced to a name in Patterson's correspondence, and an occasional entry in Elena's updates from Denver. The twist was a letter from James Aldrich's family. She hadn't known he had family, or rather, she had known the way you know things about someone from letters, which is to say she knew the outline without the detail. The letter was from his sister, a woman named Ruth Aldrich, living in Cheyenne, who had found Clara's address among James's effects and had written to say that she hoped Clara was well and that she was sorry for how things had gone, and that James had spoken of Clara with a warmth that Ruth had found meaningful, given how little time they had corresponded. Clara read it at the table. Cole was in the yard. She read it 3 times, which was not her habit, but felt necessary. Then she went to the door and said, "Come in when you have a moment." He came in 5 minutes later. She handed him the letter. He read it. She watched his face move through something that she recognized as grief that had been well managed for months, surfacing briefly in contact with a name and a handwriting that belonged to the person who had sent him here. "She sounds like him," Cole said. "The way she writes." "She does," Clara said. "I'm going to write back." He looked at her. "I want her to know he would have been good here," Clara said. "I want her to know the ranch is standing and the land is safe and the thing he set out to do got done. She deserves to know that much." She paused. "And I want her to know about you." Cole set the letter down. Something complicated moved through his face. "She should know," Clara said, "that the reason things worked out is that her brother trusted the right person with the thing that mattered." She looked at Cole steadily. "He knew what he was doing when he asked you. I want her to know that too." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "He would have loved this place," he said finally. "The ranch, the way you run it." A pause. "He would have been good here." "Yes," Clara said. "He would have." She picked up her pen. "And he sent me someone better suited." She heard the almost laugh. The real version now, she had all the versions catalogued, the full spectrum from the involuntary small sound to the actual open laugh she had heard in the barn in November, and this one was somewhere in the middle, the warm private one that she now associated with the specific pleasure of being known by a person you had not expected to know you. She wrote the letter to Ruth Aldrich. Cole sat across the table and didn't read it, which was correct, and drank his coffee, which was also correct. And when she was done, she folded it and sealed it and set it with the outgoing mail, and they went back to the evening's work. Spring came early that year. March was warmer than the almanac predicted, and by the second week the ground was soft enough for the preliminary work on the kitchen garden, which Clara had been thinking about since November, and which she now approached with the systematic determination she brought to every project she cared about. She had ordered seeds in February. Specific ones, some from her mother's original plantings, sourced through a seed merchant in Denver that Elena had found for her. The particular tomatoes her mother had grown, the herbs, the beans, that had come from her mother's own mother's garden, somewhere back east, before the family had made the choice to come west and try to build something real in the hard ground of the territory. Cole prepared the bed. She had told him it would take both of them, and she had been right. 2 years of unworked soil was dense and demanding, and they spent the better part of a Saturday turning and amending it, both of them on their knees in the early spring mud, with the work between them and Hector walked past twice and found reasons not to be needed. "My mother would have liked you," Clara said at some point in the middle of the afternoon. Cole kept working. "Why? She valued people who worked without being asked," Clara said. "She thought it was the most honest indicator of character. Anyone can work when they're being watched. The question is what you do when no one's paying attention." "You pay attention," Cole said. "I do," she said. "But you didn't know that in the beginning." He considered that. "I knew," he said. She looked at him. "You paid attention to everything from the first day," he said. "That first wagon ride. The way you watched the land the cattle me. You were cataloging." He glanced at her. "I knew I was being assessed. I wanted to pass." She sat back slightly on her heels. You never said so. I didn't think it would help my case to say so. The corner of his mouth moved. You seemed like a woman who preferred evidence to testimony. She looked at him for a moment. You understood me very quickly. You're not difficult to understand, he said. You're clear. That's different from simple. She went back to the soil. Most people can't tell the difference, she said. I know. He turned another section of earth. That's their problem. They worked until the light started failing, and the bed was ready, and Clara planted the first seeds in the last of the afternoon warmth, with Cole sitting on the edge of the prepared ground, watching her work. And she thought about her mother talking to plants as a form of prayer, and she thought about her father's statement that working the land was evidence of intention, and she thought that the garden going back into the ground was both of those things, and also something else. A declaration that the worst of it was done, and the building could begin. And everything that had nearly been lost was being reclaimed, season by season, root by root, in the ordinary, ongoing life of a place that had survived. Cole, she said without looking up from the row. Yes. When Ruth Aldrich writes back, and she will write back, she seems like the kind of person who answers letters. I'd like to invite her to visit the ranch. A pause. She'd want to see it. Yes, and I'd want to meet the woman who raised James. She pressed a seed into the earth. And I want her to see that it worked out, all of it. I want her to see the garden and the fence and the deed on the wall with both our names on it. She looked up at Cole. I want her to see what her brother built, even without being here to build it. Cole looked at her with the full expression, the open one. The one she had stopped trying to catalog, because it had become simply the way he looked at her entirely, without management, with everything that was behind it present on his face. He'd want that, Cole said. I know, she said. So do I. She planted the last of the afternoon seeds. The garden was begun. The ranch was standing. The spring was here. 6 months to the day from the morning at the train station, Clara Whitfield found the original marriage papers in the bottom drawer of her father's desk, where she had filed them on the day they'd come back from Harvey Dunn's office. She had been going through the desk for spring organization, the systematic seasonal clearing of the paperwork accumulation that she conducted every year, with the thoroughness of a person who knew that disorder in documentation led to disorder in everything else. She pulled out the stack of papers from the bottom drawer, and there they were under a survey map of the East Pasture and a letter from the seed merchant. Cole Maddox and Clara Whitfield, signed on a Thursday in August in the office of Harvey Dunn Territorial Land Attorney, with 2 witnesses, neither of them had known personally, and a date that now felt from this side of everything it had launched like it belonged to a different version of both of them. She carried the papers to the kitchen. Cole was at the table with coffee and the territorial law book he'd been working through all winter, and he looked up when she came in and saw the papers in her hand, and his expression asked the question without words. She sat down across from him. Set the papers on the table between them. Do you remember this day? She said. He looked at the papers. Yes. What do you remember? He considered. A woman who was furious at a situation she hadn't chosen, he said, who was also underneath the furious, the most composed person I had stood in front of in a very long time. He looked up at her. I remember thinking that James had understood something about you from the letters that he hadn't told me, and that whatever it was, he'd been right about it. What did you think he'd understood? That you were the kind of person a man could actually be honest with, Cole said. Not tactfully honest or strategically honest, actually honest. The kind where you say what's real, and it lands without destroying everything. He held her gaze. That's rarer than people think. She looked at the papers for a moment. At her signature in August and his, beside it, 2 names that had been strangers to each other and were not strangers to each other. Now that had been a legal instrument and were something else entirely. Now something that no territorial form had a category for. But that was as real as anything she had ever known. I said something on this day, she said, at the train station. He waited. I said I ordered a husband, not a gunslinger. She looked at him. I have thought about that a great deal over the past 6 months. And I was wrong, she said. Not about what I said. I did order a husband and I did not order a gunslinger, and both of those things were true at the time. She paused. What I was wrong about was thinking those were the relevant categories. She turned the papers slightly on the table, a small deliberate movement. What I needed, and what I said in the letter to the agency, was a partner. Someone honest. Someone who would work beside me and not try to own what I'd built. Someone who could be trusted when things were hard. She looked at Cole directly. I did not order a gunslinger. I ordered a partner. And you are the best partner I have ever seen in the work of anything that matters. Cole looked at her across the table. The morning light was coming through the kitchen window, the same way it always came through, the same light that had been coming through that window since her father built the house, the ordinary, irreplaceable light of a life continuing in its place. Clara, he said. Don't say thank you, she said. I'm not telling you for your gratitude. I'm telling you because it's true and because you deserve to hear the true version of what happened here. He was quiet for a moment. What is the true version? She thought about it. 6 months of thinking had produced in her careful and thorough way a fairly complete account, and she gave him the whole of it. A woman who had been alone too long tried to solve a practical problem practically, she said, and received instead something she hadn't known she was missing. And the man who showed up carrying someone else's promise discovered that a promise, when you keep it with your whole self, becomes something that belongs to you rather than to the person you made it for. She held his gaze. The true version is that 2 people who had gotten very good at surviving alone found out in the hard way that they were better at everything when they were doing it together. Cole reached across the table, put his hand, the scarred left one, over hers where it rested beside the papers. She didn't move her hand. I'm not going anywhere, he said. It was the same thing he had said in the kitchen the night after the supply shed burned. But it was a different sentence now, freighted with everything that had happened since, and everything that was going to happen after, and both of them knew that. I know, she said. She turned her hand over under his and held it. The papers were between them on the table, the ones that had started as a legal instrument, and had become in the course of 6 months and a fought-for ranch and a kitchen garden being coaxed back to life in the spring ground, the first page of a story neither of them had known they were writing. Outside, the weather vane turned in the morning wind, free and precise, reading the direction of everything with the quiet accuracy of something that had been repaired by a man who intended to stay. Hector arrived in the yard and started the morning tasks the way he always did, with the dependable rhythm of a life well ordered. The cattle were in the north pasture, the fences were holding. The east pasture lay clean and uncontested under the Colorado spring, exactly as it had always been, exactly as it would remain. Clara Whitfield. Clara Maddox on the deed. And Clara Whitfield, always in the marrow of herself, sat at the kitchen table of the house her father had built with the man she had not ordered, and could not imagine the ranch without. And the morning was exactly what mornings are supposed to be, ordinary, and full, and hers. She had not gotten the husband she ordered. She had gotten the life she deserved, and that, on the Whitfield Ranch in Willow Creek, Colorado Territory, in the spring of 1885, was the only truth that mattered. And it was a truth that would hold like the fence posts Cole had set in the August earth through every season that followed, solid and permanent and built to last.